Osman Kant. During the forum, this year's 2025 Stockholm Climate Leadership Forum, you were crowned as the father of GPUs. What a magnificent job you've done. You've created the 3D labs, and then which sold to the creative labs, and then you since then have been funding global innovation as a deep tech investor. So you just before the interview, you told me something amazing you just seen as a new revolution or evolution from the dematerialized equipment. So please tell us the technology.
Okay. One of the things that emerged to me when I was researching before I came here and the discussions here, that one of the probably most important things we can do with agriculture and AI is to come up with new things we can grow. And or perhaps take existing things and make them more nutritious or tastier. Because I was also reading recently, for instance, that traditionally agriculture did selective breeding to improve crops, the animals and roses and all kinds of stuff. And there was an interesting experiment recently where they actually grew this rose, but it looked gorgeous and it survived a lot. But by mistake, they eradicated the smell. The scent of the rose was gone. So when we are doing this with, say, for nutrition, and taste is the analogous, if you like, in fruits and vegetables, we need to make sure that we don't miss the taste. So my dream is, just as we can now with AI model all the possible proteins with fruits and vegetables and things we grow, that we can actually model all the nutrients and control how nutritious or tasty we can make new generation plants.
Well, that's how inspiring, because we talk about AlphaFold, we talk about protein fold. Would you please elaborate a little more on that? Because now you're going to the frontier of the new agriculture, instead of course, the traditional way of, which lasts for 10,000 years or even longer, since humanity has domesticated crops. So, and that actually brought us to this current civilization. Right now, you're talking about utilizing your fantasy into the technology field, where you could actually reimagine how the traditional agriculture would look like and combine the genetics into the new field of agriculture. And also, of course, we're seeing here our innovation comes like right now shooting us are iPhones.
That's right.
Like, it's unbelievable. Like, things could be dematerialized and being so communicative. So this is, we see exponential leaps all the time in technological innovation. And we would like to see that in agriculture.
Yeah. And the first time I saw this, when they were shooting actually a documentary in my house. And BBC came, and they had 3 cameras. The primary camera was an DSLR, but the secondary cameras were all iPhones. I said, and they were also using gimbals from the drone world in their hands. So all these new innovations enabled them to do things very, very inexpensively. But it required, for me to be convinced, someone like BBC to adopt it. So that was the key thing for me. And from then on, whenever I'm an amateur producer, when I was producing things, started using just mobile phones and gimbals that I could use from the drone world. But coming back to the proteins and how we can take a journey, I was very careful not to use the word genetic engineering, because the world is probably not ready, because there's been such a backlash for GMO crops, as you know. But we, as humans in agriculture, we've been doing genetic modifications with selective breeding. Yes. So that's or by taking one plant and actually attaching it to the body of another. That's right. So But the key thing in the beginning is to see what is possible, and we can only do it by something like what I called Nutrifold, analogous to AlphaFold, right? And I'm donating that phrase to the world, so
Everyone would adopt that.
everyone can use that, but it just embraces the concept. The key thing is we can now look inside a biological thing, simulate it, and understand how the nutrients can be maximized or balanced, and how we can improve the taste. Because you heard me say, I've seen so much industrial farming remove the taste while keeping the beauty, the visual beauty, and the shape and the longevity, predominantly for financial reasons, because that's what the supermarkets want to buy. But the other reason for maximizing the nutrients is if we have shortage of land, water, and other resources, if we can double the nutrient capacity, perhaps we could have the same benefit from food by just eating half as much. That means we would need to grow half as much. So that's another way of solving the efficiency problem.
Well, this is amazing because would you just tackle few things. One is, of course, traditional agriculture. And also you did talk about incentives, because the reason you said about they grow these tasteless tomatoes is because of financial market, the supermarket, they want that, they buy that, right? So if there will be nutritious food grown sustainably, but also with very high financial reward, that may be a kind of incentive to incentivize farmers to adapt into new technology more rapidly.
Absolutely, yeah. And if we focus on Europe just temporarily, Europe is renowned for its culinary taste, right? And using great produce. And so it would be very natural for Europe to come out with the technologies and example incentives how we can actually make this happen in Europe, and then it will just permeate to the rest of the world.
That's such good promise. Thank you so much, Osman Kant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Kirsten, you often talk about system innovation. What does that mean to agriculture and food?
Well, systems innovation refers to designing, deploying, and financing innovation to have a systemic and a holistic outcome, which means understanding that in food and agriculture, for example, it's not about the fact that you have one single solution for carbon farming or something that is a good way of making a better business in methane emissions reductions or in the way in which you think about dairy and beef. But you are dealing with a complex system in which there are many parts that have a relationship with one another, that are governed by rules, whether explicit or implicit or latent, and that produce are founded in mindsets. So when we say systems, we're talking about the fact that you intervene in all of those. So if we are, for example, talking about the way in which we take a perspective on what it is that food and agriculture means in the context of the planet and planetary boundaries, 30% of emissions produced by humans come from food and agricultural practices. Some of that is in waste, some of that is in the emissions from, for example, livestock, from methane emissions, cows that fart. Some of that comes from the way in which we are using fertilizers on the land. To address agriculture and food transition, you need to encompass the whole, and you need to work on all of the parts that make up that emissions amount, the relationships among them, and the rules, like the incentives to continue to farm in a particular way to optimize for efficiency, or the fact that people grow up with a mindset that means that they are prosperous and they feel that they are doing well if they're able to put meat on the table every single day. This kinds of set of combinations is what we mean by that. And for innovation to achieve a transformation, i.e. our human design for life becomes sustainable, we need to work on all those elements. And
are we doing enough? Are we making progress?
No. We are doing many things. We have taught ourselves for the last 150 years to look at complex problems and break them down into small parts and deal with them in focus and sequence and in very linear ways. And so we are doing that. Sometimes there is more and more effort to work in a more holistic way, in a more systemic way. But in the end, we are still talking about hundreds of individual droplets of water, if you like, that are not yet adding up into the major watersheds that would change our economy and our lives. So we don't just need, the African proverb, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. But we actually need to go far and fast. So it's going to need the operation on many things at once.
So your climate kick brings together business, government, and academia. Which part is hardest?
The combination of them all. In fact, what we talk about ourselves as an organization that bridges the gap between commitments that governments or businesses or communities make and the reality of where the world is now. And that gap is incredibly messy. So we call it the messy middle. And in that messy middle, where we are combining elements, it can change from one day to the next. We deal with far-right populist parties who are convincing people living in the streets of Madrid that a 15-minute city is a European hoax or a European plot to lock them up in ghettos, and then the hardest part is getting back to the community to try to unwind that thinking. Or we are dealing with government officials who are just massively overstretched, overburdened. They don't have the capacity to deal with so many things, and sometimes the hardest part is just exhaustion and uncertainty. Or you're dealing with businesses that have quarterly pressure to report on a profit, and that's completely, or they believe it's at odds. So it's a little bit about every day it changes, but the relationship among them is probably the most complex thing to deal with.
So is the transformation too slow? And if so, how do you keep your optimism alive?
The transformation we need to undertake is disastrously too slow. I think my optimism comes from a couple of things. It's a question of determination and will. We don't have the luxury to be pessimistic, really. That would be a luxury now. I think that we will face collapse in different ways. My optimism comes from the fact that everything that we can do, that many of us, the vast kind of field of people working in different ways can do to prepare alternatives, to be ready, to be able to try, to learn, to demonstrate, so that as different crises begin to land in people's minds and experiences, there is an alternative to work with. But it also comes from the fact that I think it's very dangerous to underestimate human ingenuity. We are creative beings in a tight place, and we're in a tight place. So I have a lot of faith that we are gradually relearning, we are gradually unlearning the habits of the last couple of centuries and relearning how to work with deep indigenous knowledge, with traditional wisdom, in collaboration, in ways that really begin to stretch and test some of our assumptions. It's exponential. I think we have a lot of Earth system science looking at negative tipping points, and these are where the Amazon or the North Atlantic Oscillation changes. But there's also the beginning of understanding we can learn from that to apply it to positive tipping points. If we change the feedback loops of what we believe is important and one thing feeds another, hope can be an exponential experience.
It's wonderful. We wanted everybody to leave this forum with hope. And you are such a good spokesperson for that. So thank you so much, Kirsten.
Thank you, Magnus.
So we've got Ingmar Rentzog from We Don't Have Time here today. Ingmar, you just met the Pope. Why were you there?
I was invited to the Pope's summer residence, Castle Gandolfo in Rome, together with more than 400 climate activists and scientists and people pushing for change. It was everything from religious people, priests within the church, to non-religious people, to people representing other religions. So it was very cross-pollinating worldwide gathering. And the reason why the Pope invited to this unique gathering was to mobilize basically the people on this planet to support science and support the climate agenda. So this whole meetings, the end result of it will be presented at the COP meeting in Belém. And the climate minister from Brazil was there to receive it, etc. So it was very interesting. It was kind of a high-level meeting, but also very much a public people meeting. And the reason that they have selected me and other climate leaders, such as Bill McKibben, Arnold Schwarzenegger, etc., is that those climate leaders can mobilize people in their turn. So I was very honored to be part of it, and it gave me a lot of hope. The name of the conference was Raising Hope, and it's just back from there with a lot more hope, because this actually, as a climate activist, it's something unique to not only feel but be told that you have the backing of the Pope, and he represents 1.5 billion people. So that matters a lot, where you see so many world leaders that are walking in the wrong direction, even lying and don't caring. So here is the opposite leadership that really can bring something into the world. And the Vatican institution is also the institution that are still very trusted, regardless if you're left or right in the political spectrum. Many people are still respecting the Vatican.
And you mentioned science there. That brings us to the cap. What do you mean with make science great again?
Yeah, so I think most saw me in that conference wearing this cap. This is a campaign we're running on Vino Time, and it's all about to talk about and get attention to the fact that while science has always been great in a way, but you can't really say that science is great if the leaders, the policy, and our political leadership are disrespecting it and even attacking it. That is happening today. For example, in the United States, the government are shutting down satellites, burning them up, that are measuring carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They're trying to stop climate observatory, they stop climate research, etc. Scientists are even fleeing from the country to Europe to be able to still continue doing the job. But it's not only United States. This anti-science are spreading. In Germany, one of the biggest party, maybe the biggest soon, AFD, they want to destroy and tear down all wind power. In United Kingdom, you have the conservative politicians that wants to cancel United Kingdom's climate target. In Sweden, we had our own finance minister here in national TV lying and saying that Sweden has the lowest carbon footprint in the world. That is not true. That is anti-science. What we need to do here is that we need to make science great again, so that people respect that facts are facts and opinions are opinions. We can have different opinions, but we can't change the facts. And I'm so glad that the Vatican thinks the same.
So Ingmar, in today's conference, we've been talking about the food system and the agriculture. How would you say we can be a part of the solution rather than the problem?
Very unfortunate, I missed the conference. I just arrived. But what I believe is the kind of most important thing in the food system is the fact that we need to turn the subsidies to, instead of sponsoring a locked-in fossil fuel dependency of destroying nature when you grow your food, we need those subsidies to subsidize when you're regenerative nature when you grow your food. There's so many solutions out there, but in today's system they are more expensive. Many things that is because they are more expensive, needs more work, etc. Can be that way, but many times it's because that someone are sponsoring the fossil fuel, so that becomes cheaper. I can give an example. If here in Sweden, if a farmer buys diesel to his machines, he receives subsidies from the government. If he, on the other hand, don't buy diesel, but produce diesel with biofuel on his own farm, he doesn't get receiving any subsidies for that. I mean, come on. That's how we need to address. It's not everything, but it's one big part of it. The other part is you and me. We that consume food, we can do a lot of choices. We don't necessarily need to buy the cheapest alternative. Let's buy local, let's buy a greener alternative, more healthier alternative. We don't need to stop eating meat, but we can eat much more responsible. And if we eat meat, let's eat the meat that is produced in the best way near where you live, where you can respect it. That's how I believe we can change the food system together.
So there's actually a lot of stuff we can do, each and every one of us, to make this better.
Yes, and the positive thing with food, last year event we had AI and climate as the agenda, and that's very abstract. I mean, not everyone is working in AI that are participating in a forum like this. But food, you don't need to be a farmer or to be have a store or a restaurant selling food. Everyone eats food. Everyone understands this, and it only takes to be part of the change is to think how you eat, and even if you're not willing to change the way you eat, you can change it by just asking question when you're going to a restaurant. Where comes this meat from? How is it produced? That will change the whole value chain and the whole service if more and more people start asking that. So start asking questions and start, learn things, and you will be part of the change and revolution.
Thank you very much, Ingmar.
So, look, Katarina, good to have you here. I would like to interview you with some questions. You worked at the intersection of banking, sustainability, and now became the fellow of Exponential Roadmap. What do you see as the single most powerful level to scale climate-smart finance into agriculture?
I'm going to have trouble, I think, just mentioning one lever, but if I can mention a couple, I think taking a broad approach to a value chain that is both complex and very intertwined is going to be helpful, and we need to recognize the primary producers. So when we invest in making the supply chain of food and food production more resilient, we need to think of the farmers. So that's one thing. Another thing, I would like to see that we have a blended approach also to what we mean by finance. There's lending, obviously, traditional lending, but there's also other kinds of supply chain financing and incentive in supply chains. There could be purchasing power deriving from consumers. There could be also national financing and public procurement and what have you. So just to keep an open mind to what kinds of finance could actually help make the food chain more modernized and resilient and robust.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. That's
yes.
What you say. So, global reports highlight billions of unmet financing needs for agri-food systems. In your view, what will it take to unlock the flow of private capital into this space at scale?
Well, I think we also need to keep in mind that we're not financing just one thing. I think it might unlock more private capital and blended capital for that matter if we look at this not only as being investments in sustainability or carbon sequestration or food security or biodiversity or climate adaptation or any of those things individually, but we're actually looking at modernizing the entire food chain system, which in itself would unlock more finance.
On a scale 1 of 10, how confident are you that private capital can be mobilized at the scale needed for climate-smart agriculture within this decade?
Well, it's important to be optimistic here, right? And there's a lot of attention being put to these issues, I think both politically and a lot of incentives, not incentives, but initiatives going to see how we can close this financing gap. So with a mixture of private and other kinds of capital and financing, I'd say it's a solid 8.5.
But that's great. So you're positive. That's the best.
I think that's important. Yes, we need to.
I think so too. Thank you so much.
Tobias, as a global leader in sustainability, especially leading agriculture field, so please tell us a little bit of the water security and irrigation efficiency, because I also know that you, as a super farmer, you have invented systems yourself to manage biodiversity, the ecosystem services, and also you learned to manage finance and risk sharing. And so you, of course, using technology as well as data to manage the food security and, in a way, global geopolitics, especially although you're German, but your big farm were in Ukraine. So that is, the geopolitics is very important. And also, to be able to do the farming, you have to handle supply chain and the trade dependencies. You have to manage that, as well as circularity and waste reduction management. And of course, the farmers' life and their livelihood and their social equity. And all of this regarding sustainability, everything is actually a philosophy that influences the culture, behavior, and also I would like to talk about the behavior shift. Please let us hear your view on this.
Yeah. Cynthia, farming is so diverse, right? Because so diverse as our food. I mean, we eat bread, we eat vegetables, we eat fruits. And I believe each one has really very specific challenges. Maybe let's speak about one of the staples we all enjoy, like bananas. Bananas are produced in just a very few countries globally, and it's all the same germplasm. So we are really running the risk that with just one disease, the whole banana production comes to an end. But I mean, how can that be? I believe there is innovation necessary, but there is also probably a much more broader diversification, and that we accept that we grow also bananas in places which are not so productive, but which are closer to the consumer. Look at the coffee supply chain. I mean, coffee is so susceptible to climate change. It yet at the same time needs a lot of water in production. What happens? The production is always moving up the mountains in key growing regions. At some point that will come to an end, right? So we need really to understand, if we want to really to enjoy our morning espresso and cappuccino again, that we find a way to sustainably really ensure that the coffee production is really ensured. And I believe what is also required here is innovation in breeding, innovation in technology to understand how much water is each plant using. Like, for example, with technologies from Constella, measuring temperature and water from space, really to help those growers really understand. And I want to share maybe a last example more here from Europe. I mean, as we speak, there is a shortage of beer in Japan at the moment. And a lot of hops, which is consumed in Japan, is actually produced in Europe. Actually, in very few places in Europe, in the Czech Republic and the southern part of Germany. And we need really to help the brewers, and I believe that is possible, to understand, is their supply chain secure? How can we use technology also here, understanding into the water cycle, into new varieties, into new mechanisms of cultivating hops, to make sure that the hops production for the big producers in Japan is safe, so that people also in that part of the world can enjoy beer.
Fantastic, fantastic. Could you tell a little bit of, share your experience on how technology could help in precision farming, on irrigation, and also talk a little bit of your satellite ventures?
Yeah, biggest pleasure. Water is such a scarce product, right? I mean, and at the same time, we have been coming out of a past where many growers have water rights acquired, and they have these water rights on a specific day and time during the week. So like every Thursday at 5, my water rights might start, and guess what? I'm just opening the water just to flood my fields. Irrespectively, is there enough water, or is there or not? And for example, with Constella, we operate our own satellite constellation, measuring exactly that water in a very accurate way for each field, almost for each square meter, almost for each plant, to exactly understand, is it really necessary that I irrigate now or not? Is it really necessary? Is the plant really stressed or not? We can see that from space really for the first time so early that we can still mitigate and by adding fertilizer or water. So I believe here technology is absolutely crucial to increase the water efficiency of agriculture.
Well, what a fantastic thought, because the one thing most people don't really know is that 70% of the fresh water usage globally we use for agriculture.
Exactly.
And most of them are being wasted.
Yes, correct. But you see, also for growers, it is not that easy just to say, hey, let me save water. Because one very, very traditional and well-working technology of saving water is to stop plowing. So you essentially do not turn the soil anymore, but you keep it closed. But that brings a lot of, that preserves the water, but that brings up a lot of new weeds. And growers are struggling to combat those weeds. So we are also here looking at new technologies, like from green eye technologies, really helping growers to apply their herbicides very accurately on an individual part of the field, so that only really the weed is sprayed with the herbicides, and the volume of pesticides is probably reduced by somewhere between 70 to 90%.
Oh, amazing. So that means that the IoT devices, and also, do you think that the AI might be of help in solving this issue and helping farmers?
I believe we have AI already in agriculture. We have AI in the form of computer vision systems, really helping growers to understand, in the form of analyzing satellite data quickly and in time to understand what's going on. One big challenge in agriculture is that we have a rather large natural error or chaos or R in agriculture. So that will be a really interesting understanding of to which degree we can actually really use artificial intelligence to take agronomic decisions.
Yes. So when it comes to, you just say most farmers are aware of it. The adaptation rate, is it high? Because people tend, which is wrong thinking, but people tend to think that farmers are uneducated. But so in your vision or in your story, that you believe farmers are well adapted to the new technology, is that so?
I've been myself running a large farm in Ukraine for many
you
years.
are a different farmer than most of people, yes.
And it's incredibly difficult for growers. I believe they want to use new technologies and to apply them. Yet we are always speaking about a system, right? So what is important for a grower to adapt new technologies is to change the full system and to have also support, also financial support, to change the system of cultivating a crop. Just changing one component will probably not work.
Okay, thank you so much, Tobias. Thank you for this insight. Tobias Main, thank you. Thank you so much. So Stefan Krug, the founder and the legendary entrepreneur, founder of Goodell, Good Cause Foundation, Kivra, GlocoNet, and many marvelous ventures. So we have just discussed the one thing is about iPhones. So the interviewed devices are iPhones. So you talk about dematerialization because everything is getting smaller, using less material and become more efficient. So apparently less is more. And could you please tell all the audience about your Lagom economy, which you have written a marvelous book about, and then tell us about it.
So yes, lagom is an old Swedish word or old Norse word for lagom, which doesn't have its English equivalent. It means not too much, not too little, but just right. And lagom is the old word actually saying in balance with what is right according to the law. And the balance which I'm writing about is the balance with nature that humanity has, unlike other species, has moved all boundaries, but the boundary we cannot move are the planetary boundaries, and we have to get an economy that stays within them. And that's what the book is about.
Thank you very much. And so you talk about balance in good, balance in what is right. It's a law, it's old Norse law, right, from the Norse mythology. So, and then what is balance in good?
So the balance is, so the scientists have defined 9 planetary boundaries, and so those boundaries should be for us as humanity, and the economic system is the best way to organize ourselves. And in order to, since we are been overshooting for over 50 years now, what the planet can regenerate, we need to incentivize, sort of, when the economic system was invented, so to say, nature was in abundance. So economists call it externalities. It's not, we know we need it, but it's not accounted for. We only talk about capital and labor. Now we need to price nature, so that's really the core of it. And when we use the old Norse names, according to the law, the pricing mechanism, because the market will never be able to do it, so we can actually use the taxation system. Today we tax what we want more of, labor, work, which is meaningful, and we don't tax what is really scarce and what threatens our future. So that's, we should start collecting taxes for our welfare through resource taxation. And I think we should start to use all the technological capabilities that are now around and price from the consumption end, because then you can actually move ahead with taxation without hurting industry competitiveness of your country.
So thank you, which is a very good angle. And then, so tell us a little bit of incentives, because if you are going to implement a new taxation, and how do you incentivize both producer, manufacturer, the entrepreneurs, as well as the consumers?
Yes, so that's the core of the whole idea, that we have a market. The market is the engine of the society, and we have talked a lot today about innovation. But innovation is not happening out of thin air. It's happening through constraints. That's what drives innovation. And what actually gets innovation to become entrepreneurial things are entrepreneurs seeing an opportunity, because they see an opportunity to actually create something that is economically viable. And that's what the first family and friends investors, and then business angels, and then venture capitalists, and then large pension funds, they all seek what is going to work in the economy, be able to build a business around. So, but if the prices are wrong in that market, the wrong things are produced. And right now, our current economic system, so to say, has a brief to the whole economy: produce as much as possible at the lowest cost possible without caring for nature. And that brief needs to be remade into produce as much customer value as possible with the lowest resource use possible. And that's the incentive, that it's expensive to use virgin material that are rare and overuse nature. That should cost, whereas if you design for sustainability, if you have a shared economy, if you have dematerialized and so on that you talked about before, then the taxes should be low or none.
Thank you so much, Stefan Kruk.
Thank you so much.
So we got a chance to talk to Christopher Bunde, CEO of Initiative 1415. So Christopher, what worries you most at this point?
And that's a very good question. I think at this moment we need to take the next step. We need to move from wording and saying things. We need to move into action. And we need to take responsibility. And I believe we do that through activate corporates, not only through doing reduction of their emissions. They need to take an active role to contribute to increase the carbon sequestration. And it's not only that part, they also need to involve the environment part, which means that they need to also participate to increase the biodiversity and secure healthy ecosystems.
So I understand that you do not want a carbon tax. Why not?
Well, I don't think any politician wants to go to election with the message that we're going to raise the taxes. I think that's not a possible way. Just if we look into, for example, the Swedish government budget, with that budget actually, which we have on the table now, we won't reach either the climate targets or the environment targets in Sweden. So we need to step outside the tax system. And I think that we have the CSRD, the reporting in place, and we use that one to calculate a contribution, a generational contribution, money to actually deliver on the generational goal that we have in Sweden. So to reach the goal, we shall introduce the generational contribution.
What would you say is the most important thing to do right now?
The most important thing now is to introduce this type of system, and we shall do it mandatory. But that said, I mean, the reporting is already mandatory for some of the large corporates, but we also need to make the generational contribution mandatory. But we start with a small amount based on the carbon emissions and the calculation from there. And those money will be put into under the CRCF, the Carbon Removal and Carbon Farming Certification Framework, under the European Commission. So we know that this is a project that actually have the highest standard and highest quality and go above and beyond all other standards on the global arena at this stage. And this framework, we will follow up with MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. And biodiversity is something that you need to work with over time. So annual control to make sure that we are on the right path. That's really important. And I believe in a couple of years, if we start with this, let's say 2028, when CRCF, European Union will have the reporting on the CRCF, I think at that time we also need to have generational contribution in place. And when we just go forward from that another, that's 2-3 years, we're going to see a difference because we're already implementing projects for preserve and enhance biodiversity. And we can see, even in the short term, we can see a big difference and a really positive development. Mm-hmm. So we need to go from word to action now, and we can do it. So
that sounds very good, Christopher. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello, Christina. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
And I have some questions for you. First one is, if technology exists and capital is available, isn't the farmers the barrier to progress?
I think it's a little bit one-sided to say that it's the farmers' problem and they are the barrier, because the farmers is under a lot of pressure. They have the climate regulation, they have the food that has to be cheap, and a lot of other things they have to think about. I think we should think about other things they could do to help this barrier.
Yeah. But I think you mentioned in your speech that maybe age is also an issue among the barriers of farmers, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it is, because a lot of farmers, when they are younger, they work in different ways. They are digital natives. They already know about data and systems, and they know about climate change. Older farmers, a lot of them who own companies right now, they are also curious about new stuff, but they are not digital natives. So we have a barrier because of age as well. So we need to look into the young farmers and see if we can help them to become the next generation of owners by doing something about the financial situation, or maybe change the way we think about young farmers right now.
So billions are flowing into ag tech and precision farming, but yet climate impact seems to be small or marginal. Is it so that investors should have more responsibility to how they deploy the money?
You could say, but I actually think that investors already do a good job with the money, because the money follows some KPIs they lift after, and we also have some EU regulation right now. So I think we have the KPIs in place already. The investors are doing a good job. They are very good at coaching startups and making them earn some money for them. But the problem right now is actually the farmers and the startups have difficulties talking together. They don't speak the same language. If you are educated from a farming background or from the university, you don't understand the way and culture, how it functions. So we need to work with that.
Yeah. Great. So with only 6% of EU farmers under 35, is it time to rethink land ownership models altogether?
Yes, I think it is, because if you look at some of the biggest companies in the world, they are not owned by one single family. Like we see a lot of families right now is one ownership 100% with the farming family. We know for sure that if you have different kind of skills in a company, you earn more money. It's more viable in the long run. And if you look into a company like Microsoft, Bill Gates, he only owns under 2% of that company, and it's still making money. So I think we need to look into the way young farmers can invest into these kind of companies, and I don't think it should be 100%. Maybe we should introduce business angels like we see in AgTech ventures. Maybe it should be from another place we can get some help for these farmers. So yeah, I think we need to take a deep dive into how you as a young farmer get a farm.
Super. Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you for having me here.
David Groom from Deep Tech Lab, an investor, have founded more than 60 ventures. I would like to hear your opinion from the Stockholm Climate Leadership Forum, your insight, because I enjoyed your speech so much. So you talk about European technologies and how that could impact globally. So would you please give us more insight and thoughtful explanation for that?
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and wonderful job hosting us this weekend, so thank you for that. Europe has a great advantage. We have incredible talent, incredible research hubs throughout the continent, and we are creating amazing startups across all sorts of industries, all sorts of technologies, all sorts of business models. So we have the raw talent that can solve many of the key problems, and there is a problem there. And the problem is that we're not scaling solutions. We're not creating market-leading or category-defining companies that really scale to dominate world markets. And so what tends to happen is companies tend to plateau at a mid-size. And we see this dilution of value. And we see a leakage of both value and of impact, which means that the solutions that could go such a long way to resolving the climate crisis, they're not having the impact that they could be. Now, why is this? Well, on one hand, we're very fragmented across Europe. We have a lot of research hubs. If you think of the US, you think of Silicon Valley. You think of Boston for life sciences or pharma. Here, even in the UK, you probably think of Oxford and Cambridge and London. And then Eindhoven and Munich and on and on and on. So it is great to see so much innovation happening in so many places. I think that should be a strategic advantage. But there's a point in time where we need to consolidate and scale businesses, the ones that are really going to make a difference. So that's how I view Europe at the moment. We have capital. We need to direct it more effectively. But we need real expertise consolidated to bring out the very best of the young startups and give them the best chance they possibly can to succeed at scale.
Thank you. That's great insight, because I think from a pragmatic perspective, to bring entrepreneurship into the lab, bring the technology from the lab into the market and to scale, that's a huge challenge you just described. And also, because of language barrier, we all know when it comes to merging and acquisition in companies, especially in large corporations, the merge of culture is the most important part. So in Europe, due to the different languages and due to the different culture, so often that is facing the problem you just mentioned on fragmentation is very much due to this fact. So how do you see that through all the companies you have helped to build and also to support and invest in? So how do you see we can overcome and bridge this problem?
Thank you. I think it's a real challenge. If you think of the challenge of any startup, they have to first and foremost prove out that their technology works in the lab. And they're quite good at this. These technologies tend to have been based on 8, 12, 15 years of research. This is exactly what the founders know what to do. They're very good at that. But then they need to understand how it's going to work and be integrated in the client environment. And then, even if they do that, they need to figure out how it's going to be scaled up. And that's a function of manufacturing, distribution, all of these things as well. It's quite challenging because they need to find design partnerships that work. And design partners, so corporates, that are willing to take the risk, to take time, give resources, not just money, but resources to really have a testing ground to enable the startups to prove out their technology and demonstrate that it can be integrated into their environments. It's tough. The other thing I think startups really need to do is specialize, really focus. A lot of startups celebrate the fact that their technology can be applied in many, many different markets, but investors like to know which market, because you need to focus on something to be successful at it. So you have to build intimacy in that market, understanding of that market, and you have to have influence in that market. So pick your market, find the right design partnerships, but then really create a fear of missing out in there as well. You've got to be the ones in power. You've got to be clear what you need from your design partners. You're not desperate. You're not selling to them. You're the one that's doing something amazing. These people need your technology, so you've got to show them a way to adopt it at scale.
Well, thank you so much for your insight. David Groom, thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Ruscon, the owner and the house director for Champagne Hattensana. So thank you so much for a fabulous keynote speech at the Stockholm Climate Leadership Forum 2025. This year's central theme is agriculture, climate impact on agriculture, and its profound ripple effect on global economy. And you shared your insights on champagne, the most prestigious drink in the world, and also how the climate change would not only change the production and also change the culture champagne associated with our heritage. So please tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for letting me join. I think it's important because most of the people, they live in normal life. They see everything that happens every day. They get the food, the drink. But when you work with agriculture, like I've done for more than, 19 years, you see it firsthand. You see the difference it creates in the taste. And champagne is the drink of the kings, of the emperors. It's the drink that everyone loves so much for the freshness and all this. And for me, there's a huge shift in the taste that we create today than we used to do 50 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. And this, of course, will have a cultural difference in impact because it will not be something you drink at a party. It will become more of a wine for good and for bad. So I think it's very important. And I think for me to see this firsthand, that is stressful. And I told you earlier, it's the first time we actually get less of harvest, 30% less harvest because of heat. And that has never happened before. So it started small and there was a big shift 13 years ago. And it's scaring.
So you talk about in the future, champagne wouldn't exist. The Pinot Noir, the different kind of grapes wouldn't exist because of that kind of drink wouldn't be available anymore. So what I would like you to tell all the audience, especially the audience from COP30, is this, that you have such a good business practice on agriculture too, that you preserve the soil, you use a horse instead of like the machine farming, and you try to do everything with energy saving on storage, on everything. So do share that kind of knowledge with us because it's precious.
Well, it's quite simple, we cannot change the world. I cannot, but I can do change in Champagne. And I think as a region, Champagne is world leading in this. To 2026, every vineyard in Champagne will be HVA certified, VDC certified. It's the highest classification of any vineyard in the world. And of course, that affects what we do in a microclimate or what we do in Champagne. But still, the effect on the world is not only us, And that effect that we will see will definitely kill some of the grapes that we can grow today because they will be too powerful, too much alcohol, too much sugar. And the sugar creates so much alcohol and power that you lose this freshness that you need in the champagne. So you need to change those grapes to other grapes, varieties that didn't exist in Champagne, and of course that taste different. So the climate there has a direct impact on the taste, and the taste obviously on how we perceive Champagne, which is one of the strongest brands in the world. So,
thank you so much, Christopher Ruscon. Thank you.
Thank you. À bientôt. Merci.
Thank you. Per Lars Hans, you are the Chief Sustainable Officer of Rensal. So circularity and sustainability has been to your heart. So tell us why circularity is important.
I would say that circularity, if it includes detoxification, removal of contaminants, and focus on really what should we recover, can really contribute that we doesn't only reduce the CO2 emissions, but also that we can, if we do it a systematic, scalable way, also make sure that we can reduce the risk that we overshoot any of the planetary boundaries. So I think it's crucial to understand. But circularity is not to change or repair things. It's to change how we source things. And that's important to understand.
So instead of using precious raw material like virgin material, we also during the forum we talk about using urban mining to be able to get valuable material but without destroying the nature. Could you please elaborate on urban mining?
Yes, and I have a couple of concrete examples there where we have developed processes that exactly are scalable. One is, of course, how we produce phosphorus from sewage sludge or from fish sludge. And the phosphorus that we produce are of the highest quality you can find on the market. So it means that we don't need subsidies in the end if we can sell the phosphorus based on the quality. But that's one challenge that we face. European legislation for the moment bans us to use the phosphorus because the origin where it comes from determines what you can use it for. And here I work now in Canada because our first 2 phosphorus factories we are building now in Europe, they will probably sell the phosphorus to Canada because there is the quality of the product that says what you can do. And the fantastic thing, when we can sell it for a feed ingredient, then the price of the phosphorus will be so high. So the cost for the city to treat the sludge will potentially go from a cost to an income. And then you have this change. Then we will have a multiple building of factories all over the world.
What do you think this kind of incentive for the government, for municipality, for the local producers, what can make them to move?
I think that now we talk about the phosphorus, it's directly related to the food production. And it's needed. And now we are more or less dependent on a couple of mines in the world. I think that the phosphorus serve, the dominating one in Morocco, 80% of world reserves. But what we can do now with our innovation is that each and every country can start to produce their own phosphorus. So it means that egg production in the countries doesn't be dependent on import. But at the same time, we can do that on market price. So it will not cost more for the farmer. So I think it's very important of geopolitical reasons, of environmental reasons, because when the phosphorus has a high value, then also the cities will hunt for the phosphorus in the sewage. And it will not end up in the rivers and will not cause eutrophication. So there's a triple win effect for the planet, for the people, and of course for the coming generations.
Thank you so much, Per, Lars Hans. You have shown us a fantastic way moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I've got Thomas Clem Anderson here, the director of Deep Tech Alliance. So, Thomas, why is deep tech particularly important for tackling climate challenges in the agriculture sector?
Well, deep tech and deep tech startups are really important for, I'd say, any industrial sector to bring innovation, renewal, but also to build the new economy. But particularly, I believe, for the agriculture sector, because it really drives emissions, but also holds great impact potential. So if we can bring that new technology, new innovations into the sector for precision farming, for increasing nutrient density or soil enrichment, I think that can really improve the sector. The challenge is, of course, bringing those innovations from the lab to the market to make that actual real impact.
Do you think it's specifically difficult for deep tech startups to bring things into the market?
Well, you know, deep tech is a complex journey. It can be a long journey. So you need a strong supportive ecosystem to make it happen. And also, one thing is the research. Another thing is commercializing the research. We're not great at that in Europe. And when we do build startups based on science-based research, we're really not great at scaling those startups. So we need to find ways of scaling. And that happens through providing those startups with access to market opportunities and the scaling of the capital opportunities they need to scale.
So Thomas, you're the director of Deep Tech Alliance. Why do you think alliances and collaborations cross-country are important in making this happen?
Well, I think that's super important in Europe because Europe is so fragmented, right? Both from a VC perspective, but especially for the startups operating within the national markets to become great tech champions and successful companies. They just need test partners, validation partners, customers, investors outside of their home market. Otherwise, they won't grow, or they might choose to relocate and allocate to other more attractive capital markets or scaling ecosystems, and that's exactly what we don't want in Europe.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Hannes Bustam, the Chief Claim Officer at the Zurich Insurance. So please tell us, Hannes, after the forum we've discussed everything regarding agriculture incentive, what's facing us, all the challenges, the soil, the yield, the financing gap. So what bothers you the most, challenge you most in your work?
So in my work, it's when we see claims driven by climate change, weather-related, that could have been mitigated. Maybe not avoided, but mitigated. We're very good at learning after the fact. And actually, we need to be much better at learning to prevent it in the first place. So I think that's a key frustration. Something that has been a frustration, but that I'm actually really happy about, like in this forum, is that insurance is seen as a natural part of working to solve the issues that we're facing relating to climate change. This is what we do. Risk is at the heart of what we do. So we need to contribute, we need to be part of the conversations about the solutions for the future. So used to be a frustration, but I see that that's actually improving quite a lot.
So thank you for that aspect. And at the Stockholm Climate Leadership Forum, we talk about the prevention of climate disaster and also how insurance could play a vital role in financing agriculture. So could you elaborate a little bit on that topic?
Sure, let me start with the prevention piece. We have so much knowledge, so much experience with all of the thousands of claims over the years, with weather events, with experts within the business. There's a lot of knowledge there, and we are ready to share it. We're happy to share that knowledge and to advise society and customers on how they can more holistically manage their risks. So I think we have a vital part to play there, and I think we can do it really well.
So when it comes to, so after the prevention, then could you actively be involved in the agriculture business where you could engage on decision making and also when it comes to risk mitigation? And so you, instead of prevention, but actively engaged in making the agriculture be more climate resilient, because agriculture is feeding us. Agriculture is the oldest technology in the world, and it is actually about our survival, about security. Food security is our vital defense. So please tell us how insurance, you see, could play a vital role in that, in boosting agriculture.
Well, unfortunately, you're right that not everything cannot be prevented, and we have to mitigate instead. I think the insurance industry is really starting to use or have been using technology and are continuing to look for ways to use technology to support the adaptation in our societies. I see a lot of new innovation is a strong word, but new partnerships coming up and new ways of looking at solutions where maybe one player, one part cannot have a silver bullet. But when you join them together, you can come up with new solutions to solve these problems that we're seeing now.
So you talk about the system solutions, system thinking, and also scale. So that is very important for all the agriculture practices, is that you form collaboration, you form partnerships. So in that way, you can mitigate risks through maybe sharing solutions and stuff.
Yes, and there's also a number of projects, pilots, things being tested around the world in different communities. And at some point, some of them will start to scale up. Yes. And we can do it more on a systemic scale.
So because of climate change is not new, but it's relatively new to us. So our economy was built based on Milton Friedman's kind of maximize shareholder value kind of philosophy in the past years. But now we must change to kind of new economy, new way of thinking, more balanced in good. So I do think that insurance will play a very good, important role in that to mitigate risks, but also guiding the businesses and agricultural practices.
Yes, that's right. I absolutely agree with you, and I see that happening. So, while there's a lot of negativity and crisis, and there should be a sense of urgency, there's also a lot of optimism, and we can build a brighter future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hannes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Esteemed guests, distinguished speakers, leaders, and my dear friends, welcome to the Stockholm Climate Leadership Forum 2025. It's both an honor and a responsibility to open this year's forum in a year that has deep historical resonance. This year marks the 80 years since the end of the World War II. In 1945, humanity stood at the lowest points. Cities were reduced to ashes, economies destroyed, millions of lives lost. Yet, out of that devastation, the world chose not to rebuild, but to collaborate across borders. Nations created new alliances for peace, forged new institutions, and laid foundation for a global economy. From that moment, humanity achieved the unimaginables. We rebuilt industries, restored trade, and lifted billions of people out of poverty. We looked upwards and set foot to the moon. We unraveled the code of genetics of life. So we connected the world with digital technologies, and we created what could be described as alien intelligence, the artificial intelligence, to amplify human ingenuity. And this year and this history tell us something vital. When humanity comes together in the face of crisis, it is capable of extraordinary progress. We transformed devastation into prosperity. We turned division into cooperation. And now we are caught again. Today's war is not fought between nations. It is not the struggle of territory. It is a struggle for the very condition of life itself. A struggle to preserve the stability of the planet that has nurtured us for the past 11,800 years. For most of our history, humanity has lived in the remarkable stability of the Holocene. That started about 11,700 years ago when the last major ice age ended. So this stability has enabled agriculture, economies, art, and civilization itself. But today, we all know we are crossing 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. We are pushing Earth out of the safe operating space. The consequences will be devastating. The planet will endure. The question is, will it endure with us in or not? This is why we are here, and this is why leadership matters. And this is why this year's forum is devoted to one of the most fundamental pillars of human survival, agriculture, and its profound ripple effect on the global economy. Agriculture is humans' oldest technology. It is not only about food. It is about water and land. It is about finance and risks. And it's about culture and heritage. And it's about innovation and resilience. It is about how we feed people, how we steward the planet, and how we shape the future of prosperity. So this year, the forum unfolds with 3 sessions. Session 1, log on, and balance in good. Here we ask, how do we create balance in finance, in circularity, in collaboration at scale, and how we design systems that align profit with purpose and prosperity with the planet. So we are honored to welcome Stefan Krug and Lars Hans as our keynote speakers, and Hannes Bostan and Christopher Bonde as our insightful panel speakers. And session 2, it will be AI and deep tech in agriculture. Here we explore the frontier of innovation, how technology can increase efficiency, reduce waste, conserve water and resources, and empower farmers across the globe. We will hear from Osman Kant, Tobias Main, and with perspective from Frederick Östby and David Groom. And session 3, we will talk about regenerative nature and resilient agriculture. Finally, we will look beyond efficiency and to imagination to rethink food supply chains, bridging the carbon gap, and cultivating practices that regenerative ecosystems and honor culture and heritage, and rebuild resilience for generations. So our keynote voice will be Christina Yilding-Han Algaard and Christopher Rusgon, with deep insight from Katharina Balfoga and Christina Kirsten Dunlop. Together, these 3 sessions will form a journey from balance to innovation to regeneration, from the system we finance to the technology we create, and to the soil and culture we must preserve. So, esteemed guests and friends, the challenge we face is immense, but history has shown us when humanity confronts with existential threat, we are capable for profound transformation. What was rebuilt in 1945 was not only infrastructure and economies. It was hope, it was cooperation, and it was vision. Today, we need nothing less. We must be a generation that leads not through conquest, but through collaboration, courage, leadership, and aspiration. We must show that agriculture, the oldest human technology, can once again be our greatest tool for survival, for prosperity, and for balance within the planet. Please join me to welcome our first speaker, Stefan Krug. Big hand.
Great. Dear Cynthia, dear fellow humans, I think we can, I didn't know you would speak so much history. I will come back to the history. We are a pretty capable species. I would say the most capable species we've seen. So when the Earth came 4.5 billion years ago, we were not here. We have just been here for a little while on the planet. 300,000 years ago we arrived, but it's only actually on the theme of today, when we started with agriculture, that we started influencing the planet. So this was a bit what I was talking about. So we started settling down 10,000 years ago, and actually I should have made it a true hockey stick, because this is not. You've seen how we grow for the last a bit more than 200 years. That's when we really started taking off. Because unlike other species, we didn't accept the rules of nature. On the savannah or something, you can't become too many, you can't become too few. It's self-regulating to be in balance with nature. We were more capable than that. We didn't accept those rules. We were innovative. We invented medicine, and we invented different solutions and tools. And with the economic system that we've had, we have been able to prosper, many, many of us. And it's been a success story. But the very success story, the basis of the success story, is now something we have to reconsider, at least update. I actually look at economic systems a bit like a mobile phone. The one I have in my pocket was great 2 years ago. And it's, I think, number 15 of the same version. You can guess what version I got. But it wouldn't have worked today if I wouldn't have updated. And that's the same thing, I believe, with economic systems. They are not laws of nature. That's something that we humans make up. And the economic system, we have different political systems. We have democracies and we have non-democracies, but the economic system is actually what gets us to cooperate in the way we do. And now I moved on from the first slide. I called the theme a new brief for human innovation, because the current system basically has a brief to all of us working in it, saying produce as much as possible at the lowest cost possible without caring for nature. That is basically the brief that we all operate in, and we can decide to be better than that on an individual or corporate level or something. But that's the brief we have. We now need a brief, because if I now manage to click in the right direction, let's look at him first. That's Adam Smith. So he's actually the father of very much of the economic system and this thinking that we've had. He was the one talking about the invisible hand that I think you've all heard about, that if we just chase our self-interest, it will do something that is good for everyone. He had lots of morals, so he was a great person, but if you remember the previous slide, when he was around, we were 800 million people. Now we're 8 billion people. When he was around, we hadn't had the industrialization. We have become very good at producing stuff to very many. And when he was around, he understood that land, which was kind of the production factor for nature, he understood it was important, but at the time, and for a long time after, economists believe that nature is in abundance. Now we know nature is not in abundance. That calls for an upgrade. So this is kind of a picture of my life. I was born in the beginning of that slide. So the year I was born, 1972, was the second year that we humans overshot the regenerative capacity of we took more resources out than the planet could regenerate. I didn't know that. I didn't know for a long time. But what is worse, we didn't bounce back. We have more than tripled it during my lifetime. But the economic system is basically still the same. We still call nature an externality if you are an economist. It's something that we know exists, we are dependent on, but it's not in the system. So that is, if we are going, and that is my proposition, that we keep the market as engine for innovation and to build societies and prosper. That's the best. We have tried other updates, right? We have tried in the beginning of industrializations, or actually we have already done an upgrade, I would say, of the system since Adam Smith's theoretical thinking. Because when industrialization came, it wasn't always beautiful. You had terrible working conditions and other things. So they got new thinkers that started questioning the purpose of the market, actually believing the market was the evil itself. So we tried that. If we look at this as humanity, we have tried a planned economy in Soviet Union, in China, and it was terrible on all aspects, including nature. But good that we tried, right? Let's look at that view as a humanity. We tried that, but the rest of us, so to say, we upgraded into mixed economies, where we don't just have a market, we also have a state. We have different proportions of this, but it's typically the way all countries look. So in Sweden, the public sector is about half of the economy, and it's financed mainly through tax on labor. If we accept the fact that nature is unpriced, and as long as something is too cheap, we will overuse it, this is what we need to change. So we need taxation in order to have welfare, which creates a better life for all of us. But if we start taxing the right stuff, right now we're taxing what we want more of, and we are not taxing at all what we want less of. We should tax what threatens our future, which is natural resource overuse, and not labor. So, and how do you do that? I think we all have different backgrounds. So for those that are not policymakers in the room, I would say, or work with policy, I have one message, and that is that we need to price nature. So if that's the only thing you want to bring home, if we are going to keep the market as an engine of society, we need to price what is really scarce. If you are in policy, or if you're just curious, I would say that how we do it will matter. These are the guys that decide what all of us in business, innovation, entrepreneurship, investors, whatever, we try to serve consumers. They drive the whole economy. And I'm not the first to say that either. But that was Ludwig von Mises early last century that started explaining that it's not the entrepreneur, the capitalistic owner, they all serving the real captains of the boat, the consumers. So they need to get the right signals. And this man has taught us another important, that was the first psychologist ever that got the Nobel Peace, not Peace Prize, prize in economy, because he taught us that actually one major ingredient in economic thinking was wrong. We are not rational. And if you have studied business economics, then you know that's the kind of idea we have. So if we take his lessons and put them into the system, we need to help the consumers to make the right choices. We cannot burden them with new eco labels or more information on what's in the product. We need to make it really simple for them, actually for us, because we are just like them, we are consumers. So it's really hard to be a consumer. We know how our brains work since he got his prize, that our brains want to rest. We want to take the easy choice, fast, intuitive, and in a market price. Those complex issues of nature and balance and so on needs to be priced. The market can't solve it, and the consumers cannot solve it if you just dump the problem with them. So what I want is an upgrade of the economic system from what we have, a mixed economy, into a mixed economy within planetary boundaries. And I think the way to do that is to start taxing what threatens our future rather than what builds it. And in order to make it applicable, I want to do it from the end of the consumption. If you don't go from the end of consumption, you will recognize the argument, even though you're not in policy. If one country moves ahead with green taxation, that country loses competitiveness, and nothing is solved because the problem just moves around. That's the global economy. We have to accept it and design policy that can maneuver with it. Maneuver with that, maneuver with what we know about consumers. So that's the lagom economy. Since January, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, so that's really what I've been doing. But since January, I have a guest role at Stockholm School of Economics, and I've been working with these ideas, and now there's a book coming out, and it's not the answer to everything you might say, but I've been thinking a lot about this for the last 1.5 years, and if you want to have more than my 10 minutes, this is why I believe we are where we are, what we can do about it, and how we get this balance. So thank you so much for allowing me to come here, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for this very inspiring reflection and setting the stage so powerfully. And for those international guests who do not know who Stefan Kruk is a serial entrepreneur, as he has just said, and he has a conviction that business can be a force for good. And among his successful ventures are companies like GlocalNet, whom many of you have heard about, GoodL, Good Cause Foundation, and Kivra, which we use every day. And today, he's a practitioner in residence at the Stockholm School of Economics and devoting his time and his energy on developing and promoting the lagom economy. So we now turn to our second keynote speaker, a leader whose career embodies the idea of turning challenges into opportunity. Per Lars-Hans is the Chief Sustainable Officer at Rensals Group. He brings extraordinary experience in both sustainability and intrapreneurship, and been recognized globally for his contributions. In 2015, Per joined Rensal, and then a traditional waste management company facing serious problems. And under his leadership, the company not only recovered but transformed into a profitable and prosperous market leader built on the principle of circularity. Please join me. Welcome, Per Lars-Hans.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and great to have so much circular friends here. I was not the only one that turned the ship. I was contributing from my small parts. We also hired a very competent CEO, Lars Lindén from Ericsson, that really have transformed the company from this one single, multiple company to one single company that has one strategy, and that has been a key component. But the strategy needs to be based on something, and I think that's where I contribute. What should we focus on going forward? On the right-hand side, you have a model, and that's a model I developed during my 30 years in the food industry. And the model faces that if companies can understand the big challenges in society, demonstrated by the V on the left side, the resource funnel, and the demographic changes on the upper right side. If a company can address those challenges, find the organization, the person that needs this solution, share this knowledge to him or her or them, then others will speak about you. And the reason I was hired to Rensal was that they wanted me to multiply what I'd done before and do the same thing. So that's my big contribution. On the left-hand side, we do have the planetary boundaries. In 2009, I was fortunate to be invited by COP15 in Copenhagen, and I then presented the first carbon labeling scheme of food in the world, where I've been the chairman or contributor of developing. Another person that also received 1 minute, because that was the length of my speech, was Professor Johan Rockström, presenting the planetary boundaries. And for me, that perfectly fitted into my model. If I can understand the challenges and develop solutions that contribute in solving those, I can both make business within the planetary boundaries and also save the planet going forward. So since 2009, the planetary boundaries has been my guiding tool, and of course the science behind that one. The background, yes, I was hired to Rensal in 2015, and the situation was critical. We did break the covenants, and we were really having big trouble because we didn't really have a strategy. So when we understood, if we took a long-term perspective, we understood in a perfect circular economy, there is no waste, and then there's no need for our solutions. So therefore we needed to transform. So the first thing we did was what we decided that we're going to have principles that guide us in what kind of innovations we should put on the market. And we need to say yes to all those three things. First, we need to make sure that we, in this case, bring back resources that can replace or reduce the need of virgin production. Secondly, we need to decontaminate, remove contaminants from what we have put into the ecosystem. And thirdly, the solutions should not contribute that we push industries to future generations, the climate or environmental dimensions. And if we can say yes to those three, then we invest in companies, or then we invest in research, or we sell a company if we say no, because then we will have tricky times going forward. What we also have done the last years is that we have committed ourselves to become net zero by 2040. But more important, we identified our big potential, and that is that we can bring circular solutions in place that not only reduces the emissions much more than our own emissions, but also make sure that we reduce the stress on the planetary boundaries. When I will focus on now, in this case, the scalable solutions, the global scalable solutions. I will now give you the speech, part of it, that I was honored to do to UNFCCC's conference on the 6th of September. The invitation came in beginning of August, and the topic was, so the question was, we are now negotiating about the climate, and we would like to be inspired. What can circularity bring to the table? and how can we finance that? So I had the honor to represent Europe, and I presented, in this case, 5 different circular solutions. The first one is about how can we transform our wastewater treatment plants to become resource recovery plants. And that's key in the future of bringing back nutrients. Key in the future of bringing back fresh water. Here we have developed innovations that recover nitrogen from the wastewater and directly produce a nitrogen fertilizer. But also it can minimize the risk that laughing gas emissions can be emitted. The second innovation is phosphorus, where we bring back the element, but not as a low quality, it's a very high-end quality product. And thirdly, and most important, is that we have a system now to also recover and move PFAS, both long one, short one, but also ultra short PFAS. So it doesn't end up in the wastewater. The first of the innovations or the process that I demonstrated was our new innovation, where we now have put in place, just invested in 250 million Swedish krona for solvent recovery. What we do is we take solvents that normally are produced from virgin resources. We remove the contaminants, we separate them, and then the methanol can be sold as a new methanol. And the total saving, if compared to virgin production, is more than 90%. And we are now certifying ourselves to go towards the Exponential Roadmap Initiative's climate solution. So it means that hopefully we can soon claim that this is something that are needed, scalable, and that the world needs. So the requirement is that we should have at least 50% saving compared to today's virgin alternatives. Another example of innovation we developed is that we have a project in Estonia where we produce calcium carbonate by adding calcium oxide together with carbon dioxide. So this is a huge potential for Europe in the end also to become self-sufficient with magnesium. My big problem, a big headache, is that I can't use the CO2 that are collected today. So this is a CCU project. So legislation in Europe are needed to be transformed. And yes, therefore we have decided to focus a lot of our energy in Brussels. I have a permanent office there with a person reporting direct to me, and I'm there every week. A lot of my engagement are to convince policymakers about the potential and hopefully have them to make the right decisions. One of the more important areas is, of course, also how we can collect fish sludge or fish poo. That's an alternative source of phosphorus. And here we have a project now that concerns 6 countries are involved in the project. It's our technology, but we are creating a full loop where the phosphorus are one of the components, but maybe the most important component, or then being able to be sold as a feed ingredient. We can't do that in Europe for the moment, but now I'm negotiating and we have a partner already in Canada. So the first 2 phosphorus plants are now being built in Germany and in Sweden. But the project in Norway, we're focusing on the fish sludge, not the sewage sludge, had the potential to be scaled globally to any aquaculture region in the world. So that we minimize the environmental problem, but again, produce a resource. So the cost for the system in the end will be 0 or even generate income for the fish companies. The most important part here is, of course, to understand where to build. Where should I put up my factories? And I ask now the EU Commission, if you don't change the legislation, allow me to sell the phosphorus based on quality and not as today of origin. The next 50 plants will probably not be in Europe. It'll probably be outside. I visited India last year, met with representatives from 2 cities. There, it's easily to build plants, and that will definitely reduce their cost for treated sludge. So my question to you is, how can you support me in the dialogue? Because of course, when we can have those innovations, we will also be able to then have a lot of need of financing and easily to make sure that we have a return on investment, because the high income from the phosphorus sales will itself generate high profit. So my engagements are on a global level. We understood in 2018 when we started our real journey that if we're going to convince Europe that this is important, we need to be bigger in Europe. And I had the fortune to be invited to UN High-Level Political Forum in 2018, where our phosphorus innovation became the example. So, but I'd love to take questions, but my big question to you is, how can you support me to make this transformation? If you show that there are investors that are ready, we invest, in this case, our own money, or the family money that owns Ragn-Sells. But in the end, you can really support us in making sure to convince the policymakers that there is a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Har, for that inspiring keynote and the concept of urban mining, showing us how circularity can turn challenges into opportunities and prosperity. Thank you. To deepen this conversation, we now bring in the critical perspective of financing and insurance, two elements that are inseparable when it comes to securing the future of agriculture. Hannes Bustam, a leader in the insurance sector. Hannes is a chief claim officer at Zurich Insurance, one of the major insurance in the world, who brings a global perspective on how insurance can address climate-related risks. Hannes will share invaluable insight into how risks, resilience, and collaboration can safeguard both farmers and investors in the face of climate disruption. Christopher Bonde works at the intersection of policy, finance, and carbon systems, focusing on how Europe, and especially the Nordic region, can bridge the funding gap for regenerative transitions. His perspective connects economics with ecological necessity. And Christopher is the CEO of Initiative 1415. Together, they will join us and explore how capital and insurance can work hand in hand to build resilience and unlock transformation at scale. Please, welcome.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and nice to see you all here. Hannes Bustam, Zurich Insurance, a slightly different perspective, and I think that's the point. In insurance, we often say that we are like the canary in the mine, i.e. sensing danger, because we are one of the first ones to actually pay when something happens. But I would say that that has slightly changed, because risk is more on the radar today than ever before. I think farmers, the agricultural industries, and society at large are seeing increased uncertainty, increased volatility, and greater exposure. If you're a farmer, risk management isn't really a voluntary option, it's a must. When you work in insurance, or where we see that we need to contribute and change, is that we need better and more expanded models to quantify the risks and to understand them for the future. Advise the communities, the agricultural communities, with what we're seeing and the insights that we have gathered with our climate models that we have put together, where we use our claims data, that I represent, weather data, and open source data. I think I wanted to just slightly mention something also that links to what Stefan said, which is around price. Because there's often discussions around price of insurance. But if it's something that insurance have always been good at, it is to quantify risk, i.e. price risk. So if you want to change the price on insurance and risk, then it's actually around prevention. And that's where we can support in our insights.
And also when it comes to insurance, that often we can see that insurance companies have a major role in preventing, exactly as you mentioned, Hannes, and preventing from disaster happen beforehand. So that it's not only so farmers will pay less,
overall would be better and saving for the planet because the disaster didn't happen. And often we have seen multiple times that insurance company played a vital role in that position, because if you refuse to insure a certain thing, and then what happened is there are both dilemma and opportunity, is that people would know this thing is dangerous on one hand. On the other hand, when it comes to agriculture farming, especially small, medium-sized farmers, if they don't get insurance to insure, they will not be able to get financing from banks. So that is a very big dilemma. So I would like you to chime in and to tell me a little bit of that part.
Sure, I will. And you describe it very well, because it is a dilemma. As I said, the price on risk is generally speaking accurate. So reducing the price will not actually reduce the risk or impact the risk whatsoever. We have the data and the insights. We have technology today. There are different solutions, innovative solutions appearing, pooling of risks or sharing data that otherwise only larger farms would and businesses would have access to, and now actually providing it to everyone to model it. There's a really interesting banking example from China, where a bank used AI, satellite imaging, and so forth to better and more accurately determine the credit risk. And it led to a lot more small farmers being able to get loans, and therefore they could continue with their business. So the collaboration, new collaborations, not just the traditional ones, use of technology and the understanding of data, I think can have a huge impact also for small farmers.
That's a great aspect, Hannes, because currently what happens, especially in Europe, because of the policy, because we talk about how we connect entrepreneurship with innovation, with policy, and financing, right? So the thing is, a lot of large farms that they monocropping, and then that the risk with monocropping, we all know there's create enormous environmental and biodiversity risks. But the policy, European policy, was based on acreage. For example, like how large you will get the subsidy for agriculture based on how large your farm is. So therefore, like, these kind of smaller farms where they will, for example, plant trees to prevent landslides, and they would want to have cover crops and lagoons and so on and so forth. And so these kind of practices, regenerative practices, they often would increase the biodiversity. However, they don't get European government the subsidy. And then without the kind of subsidy, they are really struggling on the brink of bankruptcy. And if the insurance could, let's say, utilizing technology to give better support to farmers, that would be a great help, because we do want to see is a booming of agriculture with diversity, not only large, big foods, but with the small and medium-sized farmers.
Yes, and there are examples of that where you're linking not just the protection of insurance, but you're linking it also to promoting sustainable business behaviors. There's a complex dilemma in this. There are plenty of examples of it, and especially around when policymakers have done their jobs. So, for example, there are certifications where you can offer better insurance rates based on you having those certifications in place, for example. But there is an interesting dilemma, and I thought I'll illustrate it not with farming, but electrical vehicles. So on one hand, you'd like to provide discounts and premiums based on the fact that there are no CO2 emissions. But on the other hand, we see that electrical vehicles are more prone to accidents because they are more powerful and the repairs are more costly. And therefore, the risk from a financial perspective increases. So it's around finding new ways to collaborate to solve for this. There is not a silver bullet, but I think insurance plays a part in it as well.
Thank you, Hannes. Christopher, for all my dear guests, if you're looking at here, and this is a very famous painting called Ecosystem Collapse. And that is this morning brought here by Christopher. And Christopher is working at Initiative 1415. I would like you to tell us your journey and your story. Please, Christopher.
Thanks. My name is Christopher Bonde, and I'm born and raised on a farm, and I've been in the financial industry for 25 years. The last 10 years were with Nordea, and we were calculating a lot on the carbon sequestration there, and then I met two guys from the food industry, and then we decided to start Initiative 1415, which integrate biodiversity and ecosystems into the climate issue that we actually meet. And this is quite interesting because this artist, he lives in Paris, and this shows his view of ecosystem collapse, and that's what we're actually talking about. We often talk about the 5 interlinked crises, and it's biodiversity, climate, and water. That's the main part, and that actually leads us to the food security and the health. So these 5 interlinked crises are very important to address them, and we address them at the same time because it's not only about climate. We need to work with several tools here. We need to work with the biodiversity at the same time, both in the marine and the terrestrial landscape. And I truly believe that companies, when they work with reduction, they feel like that's the only way to do it, because the other side, where you actually can improve the biodiversity or preserve and enhance the biodiversity and increase the carbon sequestration, that tool must be integrated in their business model. So they need to work with the reduction, and at the same time they need to contribute, because otherwise it's not possible to reach either the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement or any goals that we put up. I mean, that won't happen. They just need to realize that we need to work with several tools to solve the problem that we are in the middle of. And why is this? This is because the next generation. Why do we do this? Why do we do it? It's for our kids, for our children. It's for the next generation. I will come back to this in my presentation.
So would you, yes, please, Pa.
I totally agree, and that's exactly what we are trying to contribute with. So we have understood very early that to only reduce our own CO2 emissions or other impacts on the environment is nothing. It's a total change, the transformation, where you have total new ways of producing things. And I'm really optimistic. After my speech in Addis Ababa on the 6th of September, I had a discussion with some of the people within the negotiating team, and they are now really thinking of also integrating circularity in the final document at Belém in COP30. And then, because that's a game changer, because the Paris Agreement as such only focusing on fossil fuels, the reduction of CO2 emissions directly. But can we do this? I think we will also have a new direction. And the 5 processes that the speech is already published on UNFCCC's homepage, so you will be able to download the full speech, also in text. And the 5 processes are possible to finance just because of the value of the resources. Of course, we need to have the right policies in place, but we don't need subsidies. As soon as you need subsidies, you are very dangerous in dangerous climates. So I'm positive that there are changes. And again, as I said, I think you can really contribute here to really show with the finance dimension that this is the way we want. This is where we want to like to put our money going forward. And just one example is that the city of Paris called me in end of June. And this is an example of how others tell our story. We heard about drunk cells. We have no operation in France. We heard about drunk cells. We would like to interview you, see if we can use your innovations. So the call was made now for 2 weeks ago, and we already filed in, and they were now interested into deep dive into our phosphorus and our ammonia innovation. And so the City of Paris Wastewater Treatment Plants Organization, that are the by far biggest in all Europe. And I suddenly say, well, we need to be spearheading because that's for their ambition. And they understood now that suddenly that if we implement the innovations, they might even that cost less than conventional methods. So hopefully we see a new change.
So, yes, I would. After that, I would ask you to end this session. Yes.
Stefan and Per, you were talking a bit of the history, and this is really interesting because we can go back to my grandfather. He was really happy to go the 60 kilometers from outside Stockholm into Stockholm in the beginning of 19th centuries. And then we take my father. My grandfather was not really aware about the climate change and those things, of course. But my father, he was pretty aware of, okay, this is something going wrong here. We are not on the right path. And we're coming to the situation where we are, and we actually know that we are really on the wrong path here. And we know what to do. But still, there is so many out there that doesn't take the responsibility for it.
So to come back, I do think that, Stefan, you actually have not mentioned about the collaboration at scale, because I think that not only Rensell itself, but you also collaborate with IKEA, with the Tetra Pak, with Alfa Laval, with all the large industries, because to put anything in, so to say, balancing good, you must have scale. Certainly, the small initiatives matters, because we do see grassroots initiatives can become, when it crosses the tipping point, can become a major movement. However, large corporations need to take the lead and show to people the balancing good, because often right now we have seen globally, it's the large corporation taking the lead to do the balancing good in both finance, in circularity, and in regeneration. So please, I think it's, yes.
I should try to end. Okay, thank you for the honor of doing that. I think I would like to just add the perspective where we're united, and that is to get the mission. We know that the finance industry are great at picking future winners and investing money. And we know entrepreneurs will find real opportunities. We need to get the brief to the system right, and that is pricing nature. Pricing, putting all the knowledge you talk about into the price system so that the consumers start demanding the right stuff. And this is a narrative that needs to go out so it can be policy, because the politicians cannot do this without interest from us and many others, of course. And when we talk about we need to go to the big scale, if I may quote some of the people that have read my book now, I'm publishing blurbs from them on LinkedIn, and I can just on a global perspective, for example, mention Michael Treshkov. Used to be the chairman of Unilever, but he's been chairman of Electrolux and Ericsson and Swedish Industry and so on. And he's just saying that the current sustainability efforts are failing. In order to get it right, we have to empower the consumers to do the right decisions. And I believe that. And of course, while we together change the narrative, not because there is a majority of people on the planet that think there's something wrong and that the politicians should do something. But it's still impossible for the politicians to do it without having a clue about what to do. We have to be clear, not having a list of 100 things, having something that the 10-year-olds can understand. We need to be clear on that, otherwise they will not be able to move. And it needs to be implemented in a way, even though we will continue to work on the COP meetings, but if we can have a strategy where separate countries or regions can move ahead faster with incentives for others to follow, I think we can start moving. So all the great small examples, bringing it to the big companies, because there's so much power with everyone in industry wanting to do good stuff. I think that's absolutely dominating. But at the end of the road, and I had some discussions before, we all also know that no company, and that's why you ask for help and so on, no company can be super sustainable in terms of planetary boundaries if it's not sustainable in its profits And profits gives resources to scale. So we have to enable it, and going back to the basic brief of the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next keynote speaker is a brilliant entrepreneur, a visionary technologist, a successful business leader, and a spectacular deal maker. Osman Kant. Osman has a gift of making the complex simple and weaving together data, artificial intelligence, and system thinking into stories that resonate. He co-founded the led 3D Labs and pioneering a graphic company later acquired by Creative Labs, and has since become a global deep tech investor. Osman is regarded as one of the top 15 technologists in the West by Business Insider. He's an accomplished, but a bit rusty musician, a composer and a music producer. He has his own record label. He lives in the Roxy Music famous music studio and has received the honorary key to London. So I want to use that key one day. So today he brings his unique perspective on how artificial intelligence and precision farming and data can revolutionize agriculture and turning information into foresight, efficiency, and resilience. Please welcome Osman Kant.
Thank you. Thank you. That key to London, by the way, gives me the ability to take my sheep across London Bridge. And if they decide to hang me, I can choose a silk noose. So those are the only benefits for that. I'll do this without the slides. It's actually what the slides started with, it was actually a picture that I asked ChatGPT to generate for me. I said, generate me a positive image of AI and agriculture. And this is the most cliche you ever saw in your lives, because there was this farmer, looked like a farmer. He looked too cool to be a farmer. He was at an iPad. There was a 5G tower in the middle of the field. There was a self-driving tractor and the usual stuff. So it was essentially taking all the prejudices we have and expectations we have about the future in an image. And I said, I'm sure we can do better than this when it comes to AI and agriculture. Of course, building efficiencies, productivity, etc., those are important. But as I always say, I'd rather not be manufacturing corn syrup more efficiently. So what it is that we build or farm is as important as how we farm it. Then I said, okay, let me research this, because I'm not really from the agricultural background. So I came across this 92-page EU report on AI and its impact on agriculture, written by esteemed scientists, not AI. And so I said, let me do an interesting search. My education taught me to focus on omissions rather than commissions in life. So I searched for the word nutrition. So this 92-page report only had 2 instances of the word nutrition. A whole report, EU report. I said, search me the word taste. It had 0 instances of taste. Again, it was focusing on, if you looked like the supply chain, efficiency, etc. But I said, surely one of the most important aspects is with the way we apply any technology into agriculture, are we making it more nutritious? Because one of the great opportunities could be, for example, we could double the nutritional content of a particular crop. And historically, as humans, we have done that. And in fact, I'm Turkish by birth. I'm a Brit. But I saw what industrialization did to Turkish farming during the last 40 years. So if you go to Turkey now, it's actually a sea of greenhouses. They're all plastic, and it creates, I'll just give tomatoes as an example, fantastic tomatoes which last all year round. They are very, very colorful, but they taste of nothing. They taste of nothing. And this is not unique to Turkey. I have seen that in all industrialized farming, because what they are trying to do is actually satisfy most of the buyers, the supermarkets, etc. So that's what's actually driving. I haven't done the study, but I'm sure this has no bearing on its nutritional content either. I'm guessing that it has very little nutritional content. So this talk is going to go meander in various places, but the most important thing, its punchline, is about building sovereignty in Europe and resilience. And so AI is my linchpin. AI and AI in agriculture are the two important things. Because what's happening now, the world, even the capitalist world that we've been talking about, is actually going through a transformation. Nothing is what it seems anymore. And totally unexpectedly, I'll tell you a joke here, because when I told my English mother-in-law 40-odd years ago that I was an engineer, she thought I was a car mechanic. And because that's how it's high esteem that the engineers were held in. But the tech brothers of today, and in fact tech in general, during the last few years has now become a political weapon. And in fact, it has unfortunate side effect of being able to affect everything that we do and undermine everything that we do as well. So in Europe, we are, especially AI is probably one of the biggest threats. I'm not talking about the sci-fi threats of AI robots essentially keeping us slaves. I'm talking about actors, certain actors, keeping AI for their own benefit and using it for political gain. So, and the only way to overcome that is for us to control our AI destiny ourselves. So I think, I can't remember the slides from memory, but I think the fourth slide, it was about me. It has a smiling face of me like that. But it also showed my village. I'm not from agriculture, but my family had tea plantations in the Turkish Black Sea. And talking of climate, for 10 years, they were heavily contaminated because of radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. Now, this doesn't do as much justice because it's a visual impact. My fifth slide is about Ukraine waking up Chernobyl to power its new AI data centers. I mean, this is an extraordinary news item, and so I had the pictures to prove it, but that's where the theatrics come. This is actually a fake news. Chernobyl is not being woken up by Ukraine to power its AI data centers. But what's happening is Microsoft is waking up 3 Mile Island in the US to power its data centers. Now, for those of you who are as close to my age, you may remember 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was US's Chernobyl, and it's been closed since that time in the middle 80s. This is happening because we are losing sight as an industry as to where we should focus our efforts. So it's not only Microsoft. What's happening is that almost all the major US corporations, including Microsoft, have relaxed or suspended the carbon neutrality objectives. So this is happening. And all this stuff gets reported. Nothing I'm telling you today is a trade secret. All this stuff gets reported, but no one says a thing. Where's Greta? Why is she not complaining about this? Right? So, of course, you know, it's great that she's in Gaza, but she should be. This is one of the biggest existential challenges that we have that's coming our way, and we are actually encouraging it. The number of times I use ChatGPT for that presentation that we can't show you, actually, I'm a big user of that. Now, it gets worse. A news item last week, and I had the beautiful charts, which we could distribute to you afterwards. OpenAI disclosed, OpenAI is the poster child of the AI companies. I have nothing against OpenAI, but they disclosed that during the next 7 years, by 2030 actually, so 2033, the power capacity, electricity capacity, will be 230 gigawatts. 230 gigawatts. That's more than what's predicted to be India's, the whole of country's power consumption that year. That's half of US's power consumption, expect. Now, FT reports this, Wall Street Journal reports it, no one says a thing. This is a calamity that's just coming our way, and no one is saying a thing. And then another beautiful news item I had was Elon Musk saying, we ran out of data. We cut train. Now, this is one of the most philosophically ridiculous sentences you have ever heard. It's like saying we have consumed all the world's knowledge, all the universe's knowledge, right? But again, no one says anything because there are no philosophers, living philosophers left anymore. And the people who should know better are probably not reading the news anymore. So, but then you say, okay, Osman, why is this happening? There are a variety of reasons. And the fundamental reason, the reason why we need all this data and we claim that we run out, and all this ridiculous electricity, is that current way of doing generative AI is brain dead. It is wrong. It is architecturally wrong. I'm ignoring all the other aspects. So what that means is that it needs to have huge amount of compute power, electricity, and also memory for it to run. And it's not getting any better, as you heard. That's why OpenAI is saying from the 2 gigawatt that they are at today, they're going to get to 230 gigawatt in a few years to come. But here is the mistake. The mistake is we are training. Training is the process when you educate an AI model to be something. We are training it not from knowledge that we have acquired as humans over many, many centuries, but from raw data. And that raw data training is the lazy way, if you like. And the raw data, we are very lucky or unlucky, if you like, that we have all this data on the internet available, on the websites. Essentially, the way you train AI, all that data is scraped and put into a statistics machine, and then this stuff then pops out. And one of the sad things about Elon Musk news saying, okay, we ran out of data, so what I'm now going to do, I'm going to merge Twitter, X, with XAI, his company, and I'm going to now use the Twitter data, God help us, as the source of knowledge for training future AI. So this is the state of the art. I'm not making this up. You can find all this. That's why I was talking about everything with data. So here is the important thing. This, of course, from an environmental point of view, is a calamity, but no one is, complaining about it. I didn't even mention the water usage of the data centers. But this is also an opportunity. Why is it an opportunity? Because us as Europeans, we actually have the technologies and the know-how and the skills to actually build, in fact, AI, the next generation AI, which consumes million X less power. And here's the reason why. And because if we train AI through knowledge and information, then we can achieve that huge reduction. There are other reasons why the GPU, etc., is important too. By the way, open a bracket, Cynthia's very nice introduction about my failed musician career. I'm the father of the GPU. So that's one of my, if you like, contributions. So GPU is the engine that we use today to run AI. And relevant to this story is that I actually built that from the ugliest town in UK called Staines, and took it public on NASDAQ, and it became $1 billion company. So, And why is that important? It shows that we can do it. It shows that we can do it because I was able to kill Silicon Graphics, which was the Apple of the time, unfortunately, because I loved the Silicon Graphics. So a little company, startup from UK, was able to overtake Silicon Graphics. And I know I may run out of time because I don't have my slides to guide me, but it's important that you understand this distinction in case I get run over by a bus between data and information. I'm going to tell you a very little story, and you'll never forget this, and it will reinforce it if you already know. Gauss, when he was 9 years old, in primary school, the teacher asked the class to add all the numbers between 1 and 100. And within 30 seconds, the young Gauss mathematician raises his hand and says, it's 5,050. And the teacher looks at him and says, how did you work that out? He says, well, 101 is 101, 99 and 2 is 101. There are 50 such pairs between 1 and 100, so the answer has to be 50 times 101. Now, she could have asked the question about all the numbers between 1 and 1 trillion, and again, you could work it out that way too. Now, that little nugget, first of all, you're never going to forget that. You'll probably share it with your children and nieces, nephews, whatever. And the important thing is, that is, if we were to try to ask an LLM how to do that, we would just, today, this is what we do, we give it all the sums of between 1 and 1 trillion and hope that it might come up with that equation itself. It doesn't. But it can give you the answer. But the other more important thing is, as I only gave you 2 couplets. I said 101, 99, and 2. And your brains, I'm guessing, that you probably generated some synthetic data in your brains to see whether Osman was talking nonsense. And you convince yourself this was probably true. So what I'm saying is that the future of AI is training it from information and also generating enough synthetic stuff in the AI itself, not externally, part of the AI, like we do, for it to be the next generation AI. Now, why can we do this and the US can't do? At the moment, the industry is spending trillions of dollars. And the US is seeing this, if you like, as a political tool as well. It's not in anyone's interest for the 500 billion, if you like, Stargate project, all of a sudden, for it to be a 1 billion Stargate project. So it is imperative for the emperor to still look wearing the clothes, and we have a 5-year opportunity in Europe to actually fix this. Now, let me loop it back into agriculture, because this is very, very important. In agriculture, one of the things that we have done over millennia, and thanks to Cynthia for highlighting this for me, is that it's all worked with, if you like, transference of information from generation to generation, tribe to tribe. So, and Europe, I came from the country when agriculture started. In fact, I went to the place just at the corner of Mesopotamia, allegedly, where the first domestication of agriculture happened. But in Europe, we have accumulated so much know-how over the years. So one of the things I am proposing, just like we have seed banks in Europe, we should do the model banks for all the agricultural information that we have. I don't think this has been done. And one of the brilliant examples I'll give you, my wife actually reminded me this, she's an ecologist. In England, I don't know whether it applies in the Sweden's geography. In England, there's a proverb. It says, the red sky at night, farmer's delight, or shepherd's delight. What that means is that if you have a red sky at night, the following morning, it will be a clear day. And this is, I checked it, this is apparently scientifically true, but this is again a nugget of information which otherwise would have taken, zillions of sensors, etc., to have generated. What we need to do, train our AI from these nuggets. We have so much of this. The other thing is there's a very interesting report on using GI on agriculture. There is one important thing is everything I said to you about power consumption with Gen AI is applies to LLMs, etc. But there's a new kind of AI where Europe is actually the leader, where you run models, you have no predictions, and you run these things, and all of a sudden these emergent properties turn up from the data that you are looking at. This is not LLMs. This field doesn't have a name. Or there are classical equations, it may be in biology, etc., or physics, but running those equations would take till the end of the universe. But you model those equations using AI so that you can actually run them, simulate them in real time. Again, Europe is number one on this. This field doesn't have a name. So all those new technologies would give us the ability in Europe to run a new kind of AI to make our agriculture better. But I have a dream. Let me tell you what that dream is. I know I'm probably running out of time since here. The dream is just as what DeepMind achieved with AlphaFold. AlphaFold is DeepMind is a UK, owned by Google, but it's a UK AI company. They, if you like, totally deciphered the mystery of proteins. So I said, if we can do that with proteins, we should be able to do that with nutrition. So I called that project, imaginary project, NutriFold. Right? So if we had such a project, what would enable us is to not only make with AI our systems more efficient, but actually improve food in such a way that we can actually perhaps 10x its nutritional value. So I'll shut up there and
Osman,
thank you.
First of all, Osman, you must come another time, give us a full day panel because what you just said was about the future of farming. I mean, there's so much information that you have to, because it's not only about to look at the soil and to seed in the ground, but to collect about information. You talk about the sky, the first arrival of frost, because those are the signs, those are the information. And now, satellite sensors in the orbit, the satellite the sensor in the ground, the satellite in the orbit, or drones in the sky. So, and the countless farm records, just to reflect on what you're saying, these are more data in a day than the farmer will collect in a lifetime. So there's a paradox. There's so much information, and you just talk about there's trillions of zillions of bit, but it's about what to forget. So what to forget. So then, following Osman, we welcome another leader at the frontier of agriculture technology. It's about what to forget. So Tobias Main has worked globally across agribusiness and digital platforms, and he has held senior roles at Bayer and BASF, and leading digital farming initiatives that empower farmers with new tools and decision making. As a board member, advisor, and a CCO at the space company Constella, he now focuses on scaling agriculture and technologies, helping farmers adopt new tools and that increase yield and reduce waste and optimize resource usage. And he will share his perspective on how digital innovation can accelerate the transition to smarter and more sustainable farming system worldwide. And first of all, we give a big hand to Osman Kant for his performance. And to welcome Tobias.
I'm a farmer, I'm German, so I expect a lot of numbers and very concrete stuff. I have a very different perspective on AI in agriculture. I believe whatever we can measure, we should measure and forget about AI. Reason for that is the natural error in agriculture is so big, and it actually is not quantified, that whatever we can really measure is much better, and we can really also collect the outliers. But that I would just kind of suggest a private thought really on top of my mind after Osman, after you speaking. If you hear the word farmer and close your eyes, you probably have a certain gender in mind, probably male, and probably someone who's older. And probably that's right by global statistics, right? And we probably do not associate older men just by being super open with technology and with data. I want to really prove the exact opposite. I want to really take you on a very quick journey, probably like 2 minutes, as to how farming has evolved over the last 100 years, looking at some statistics, and then really seeing what that really means for tackling today's problems. So we actually in agriculture did a fantastic job, right? I mean, we have increasing calorie production by around about 50% over the last 70 years. I mean, first of all, thumbs up for every grower. If you then double click on this, I mean, it's a very different picture. You see that the productivity gain is driven by very different factors. You see high income countries, essentially flat area, so the yield increase needs to come from somewhere else. In the lower and mid income countries, you see that they put a lot of more land in as a production factor. If you then really look at what has really contributed to this rise in productivity in the rich countries, you see that it's all really about deploying technology. And you see that really as an example here, looking at the corn yield over the past 50 years, which has like quadrupled. Yet that does not work all the time. So this has worked for corn, awesome. Corn got cheaper, meat got cheaper, but a lot of other specialty crops here, like coffee, for example, did not work. The coffee yield has not really moved a bit over the last 50 or 60 years. What really has moved a lot is that we got more productive. So far fewer people work in agriculture globally. Of course, the flip side of this is that the productivity of every person really in agriculture has tremendously increased. I mean, especially of course in Sweden, because of mechanization, because of new technologies, because of automation. And I believe all these statistics are a fantastic reason why we can be really optimistic about the future of agriculture. Let's just see what kind of technology is going to really drive that next step of innovation. Now, we not only have increased yields, but on the flip side of it, we really also have specialized. And specialization, I believe, comes very natural to every one of us, because that division of labor and specialization has been one of the fundamentals, right, of our economic performance. But for agriculture, that really has some very interesting elements. So, for example, Austria has really specialized on plums as a niche crop. And you see, hey, they did like 10 times better than everyone else who was not doubling down on this. So it seems like specialization really pays off. When you look at coffee, a very big share of global coffee is coming from like 4 countries, right? It's super scary. Very same with bananas. Exported bananas probably only coming from 2 countries or 3 countries here. And guess what? It's just all coming from one and the same germplasm. So it just requires one mutation in a disease, and the whole banana industry will just be dead. So there are really a ton of challenges ahead. And I believe we also here as human society are doing a good job, because we overall see that we can address these challenges. I mean, one of the challenges here, like viruses in bananas. You see a lot of weeds on fields in Europe, in the US, in Africa, everywhere, which simply renders fields obsolete. I mean, you cannot crop on them anymore because you have literally no means anymore except for just coming in with a brigade of people and pouring the weeds out. So tons of real world problems really exist in agriculture. So at the same time, yes, innovation is happening, and I think that's really fantastic. And if you just highlight at the sheer number of things, right? I just took out two elements, like, I mean, biocontrol products, so products which are replacing synthetic pesticides. I think probably in general a good thing, probably maybe not everywhere, right? But maybe here and there. You see a lot of people thinking about this, a lot of investment going into this. Very same with robotics, right? I mean, I was speaking this morning earlier with some of you saying, hey, we really still have, especially in Sweden, a labor shortage in agriculture. Hey, guess what? more automation is coming. Doesn't mean that there is no human anymore on the field, but it means that with one human we can simply really produce more. Does it mean that everything is good now? Of course not. And I want to really share a few very personal examples of challenges I'm facing with the organizations and companies I'm personally working with. I'm working with Constella, a space tech company. We developed our own and operate our own satellites, which are now in orbit, and we measure temperature and water every day, everywhere on the planet, a very small grid. So if you have a large pool, maybe, I don't know, Cynthia, you have a pool lake, I could tell you exactly if you should turn right or left where the water is warmer. Because from our satellites, we measure the temperature at a sensitivity of 30 millikelvin. So the satellite is able to distinguish a temperature difference smaller than at our fingertips. Awesome for agriculture, awesome to exactly build time series and understand crop stress. Of course, we were very lucky that we can partner with supply chain and food companies like Suntory, like Nestle, who really helped us really to integrate and bring those data sets to customers, because otherwise we would not have been able to. So partnering really between startups and corporates, I believe, is an absolute game changer. At the same time, demand for sustainability data really has plummeted, so that we with Constella really had to pivot to defense. I'm also with Green Eye Technologies, a company which is helping precision application to so spraying machines to exactly so machines or sprayers applying pesticides to exactly understand where a weed is growing, so that we do not need to cover and spray the full field, but just these 2%, 3%, sometimes 10% where actually a weed is growing. We have tremendous challenges, because guess what? That is destroying the business model of some people. Right? So we had really to partner here with very different companies, with retail companies, for example, in the US, bringing this technology to market, because the established route was really closed by incumbents. So also here, really being very persistent on partnerships to be capital efficient and to bring innovation out, from my point of view, has really proven very important. And lastly, what I saw for a very long time is also on the farm of my parents, that there is a need for capital. And getting capital, at least in a country like Germany, is impossible. If you build a new shed, yes, you get a credit. But if you say, I need €500,000 or €1 million just to finance my working capital, just forget it. Simply not working. So we have founded a bank in Germany, FarmFin, which is offering uncollateralized credit to growers, really helping exactly in these situations, because growers around the world are asset rich but poor in collateral. And I believe here's a regulatory opportunity for everyone in Europe to step in and get a small banking license. And here the regulators in Germany were incredibly helpful and open, differently from what you might maybe expect, really to establish such companies and a bank which is exactly targeting and supporting with that transformation. So my pledge here today is, let's really embrace innovation, but also really asking everyone who is working in a larger organization to look at a young technology company maybe with different eyes. The strength of the young companies is to be fast and to iterate quickly. So let's not measure it with the scalability eyes and the efficiency eyes of the large corporate. Let's really understand that how a large company and a small company can bring their complementary strengths together. Because I believe if we achieve this, then also innovation will really accelerate, and the production of further calories will continue exactly as it did over the last 60 years. Cynthia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tobias, for showing us how digital platforms can drive smarter and more sustainable farming and new innovation method for agriculture financing. Thank you very much. Thank you. So to enrich this session, we are joined by two outstanding panel speakers. And Frederick Spy is a seasoned entrepreneur and global head of sustainability at Grundfos. where he has led innovation program on water efficiency and resource utilization. And he focused in the water, energy, and food nexus, and passionate for using disruptive technology to solve global challenges. This has made him a serial entrepreneur such as Osman. He has now made 3 exits and 10 years in larger corporation leadership position, and he's now focusing in helping other impact entrepreneurs succeed faster. His work focuses on scaling technologies that address urgent climate challenges. So, and then our next speaker is David Groom, and someone who I deeply admire. David is partner in the Deep Tech Labs, who has helped build and led high-growth businesses across AI, advanced analytics, and software in more than 50 international markets. And his expertise lies in the intersection of innovation and investment. David brought the mindset of cutting through what you could do and focusing on what you will do and execute with clarity and speed. And David supports over 60 ventures and to take breakthrough science from labs to the market and scale globally. So together they bring perspectives of entrepreneurship and the investor, and showing how we can scale the tools and the funding and the leadership needed for transformation in agriculture. So welcome, give a warm applause.
I can take that one. So Frederick was my name, yes. I will talk a little bit through the lens of water. So I will start by saying water is life. And that's because we all need it to live. The soil we grow our crops need it. And every harvest we make in agriculture is underpinned by water. But climate change has turned this very silent enabler into a central crisis as we speak. And what we not know so much about is that already in 2030, the global demand for fresh water will exceed supply by 40%. So we are literally running out of water in big parts of the world. And like 50% of the population is already now facing severe water scarcity at least 1 month every year where they live. And this is not just a humanitarian issue, it's a direct threat to our food systems. So we need to do something, and there are basically 2 ways to address the water challenges. You can reduce the way we consume water. You can add more water into the equation, fresh water. It is this inefficiency that is the problem. We look at how are we consuming water. 70% of the water we humans withdraw from the freshwater reservoirs are used in agriculture, 70%. And we waste quite much of that because the traditional irrigation practices add more water to the fields than what the crop can actually absorb. So there is a big waste of water the way we do it today. If we look at the irrigated lands, around 70% of them supports growing crops for animal feed, not for direct human consumption. And then if we look at how we consume food, we kind of waste 1/3 of the food we produce. So all in this together is very inefficient. And being inefficient on a scarce resource when climate change is hitting us is not a good strategy. So we need to see how we can improve this. But of course, as we have heard today, humanity is very innovative, and we come up with, when there is a crisis, we come up with solutions. So there are a lot of things going on. Technology is transforming the way we use agriculture, water in agriculture. We can see that new technologies for irrigation using IoT and sensors and AI is helping us to actually control irrigation very precisely. So instead of watering very much, we can do it very precisely, and that can typically reduce water consumption on irrigated lands with up to 40%. It's a lot. We can also see new innovations coming in the space of growing crops differently. So vertical farms have been around, will be around, find its way forward, where it can produce in a different way. And also new types of proteins are coming, where we are literally using a fraction of the water that we use today when we produce meat. So I will give you some examples from real life. If we look at India, for example, small-scale farmers over there are using drip irrigation in combination with IoT sensors, and they are both increasing the yield at the same time as they are reducing the water consumption by 40%. So you can really do more with less. If we look at Scandinavia, one of the pioneering regions for vertical farms, we can now grow leafy greens year-round instead of importing from other regions of the world during winter time. We can grow it closer to consumption. And those kind of systems are reusing every drop of the water. So we are basically reaching only 5% of water consumption compared to when we grow greens outdoor. Yes, we have the questions around nutrition, and we have the questions around how do we feed those with what kind of nutrition and so on and taste. But here we can actually see that consumer tests on these leafy greens are pointing out that they are really, really good. And maybe because they are fresh compared to when we get them from Spain, I don't know. But they are selling good at least. If we look at both Israel and different parts of Europe where alternative proteins are coming real, there are now scale-up companies, and not only startup companies anymore. It's scale-up companies that are producing both fungi-based mycoproteins and also cultivated meat. And they are using literally 2% of the water compared to traditional meat farming, and only 1% of the land. So it's really interesting to see how these... And here, I think the even cooler thing is that when you put a test panel of 300 kids and you serve them, here in Sweden we love meatballs, so we serve them with meatballs, real meatballs, and then you serve them with fungi-based meatballs. They cannot tell the difference. So I think humanity is onto something where we can really produce proteins at a fraction of the impact cost. So very interesting. But this is not only about agriculture and farmers. This is big. This is national security we're talking about. We talk about energy resilience, and we talk about economic prosperity. So there are solutions, but we need to dare to ask ourselves the real question, which I think is hindering humanity from deploying those kind of solutions? Are we ready to act? Are we really ready to take action on what we know and what we have at hand to make the change? Because this is where we are failing. And I think you said it very well, Stefan. There is no price on nature. And if there is no price, we will continue to use it like it was an endless resource. Water is not endless. I mean, it's available if you zoom out and see planet. Yes, there is water everywhere, but it's not possible for us to access. It's only 1% of all that water that we can use as fresh water. And we have to see what is the price of water.
We have to use it as global commons, because these kind of natural resources like Amazon and water, freshwater reserves, we hope humanity had to use them as a global commons to put a price on that resources. Yeah. Yes.
And we can select our future here. Either we will have a world where we fight about it. It will be conflicts around water, or we take a more collaborative approach.
So actually, what you told me, your company is Groundfish as a pump company where they were pumping out fresh water from aquifer from underground. So when they have realized the shortage of water globally in the crisis, and there are places where there are drought majority time of the year, so they turned their leadership in saying, we are responsible for that. We are responsible for that situation. So what they did, they turned themselves and saying, we're going to be innovators. So right now they invented IoT devices and they're helping to reduce the usage of water. So this is called leadership. You know, that you turn a challenge into not only profit, prosperity, and also helping the people and planet, which I think it's very, very good purpose-driven company. So I think that kind of example, we should all talk more and spread the message. Yes.
Yeah, no, it was very inspirational to you can imagine when you have invented the pump and you realize that the pump is the problem. And you are the world's largest pump manufacturer. And we sit as leader in a room like this, and what should we do?
So that's a very inspiring outcome. And then, you know, also we know that, as we said earlier, when humanity are challenged, we really can find solutions. And it's a matter of, do we want to do that? Because there's a big dilemma between profit-driven versus responsibility-driven. And also, are we doing good for the greater good, or do we look inwards and say me, myself, and I? So that is a very big challenge. Yes.
Yeah, I think we are super occupied now as humanity with digital, going through the digital transformations of all businesses. I'm personally convinced that the next big revolution will be around sustainability, and those companies that actually dare to take the step to truly become a sustainable company, not only meaning profits as sustainable, but actually being in the roots
of sustainability. Yes, and based on what Osman said earlier, it is all about not overusing, because including when it comes to data, it's the same thing. Overabundance of data. But the thing is, right now we should, if we look into the tomato field, we should look at which leaf have infection. Out of 1,000 tomato, identify that single one. So it's about how to forget information, select. So that's right now, it's all about that. And precision irrigation, precision farming is all about that, right? So with that insight, thank you so much, Frederick.
Thank you.
I would like to hear.
Thank you for all three speakers.
By the way, Tobias has to go because today was very odd. Today is a special day, but however, it's the first weekend in October. Many people get sick, so he has to go back to his son. He flew this morning from Germany here. He has to fly back to his son. Something happened in the family. So I'm very grateful for Tobias managed so far, and then with us, and then so therefore we have the four panelists. So yes, please, David. Sorry.
Okay, Cynthia, thank you to the fellow panelists for setting the scene. Obviously, they talked about everything that I intended to talk about, but I've captured it in real time, and hopefully I've applied some real-time machine learning, and I'll use it as a way of tying up some thoughts and strands. Firstly, though, Cynthia, thank you for bringing together such an esteemed group. My imposter syndrome is elevated, going through the roof at the moment, but it's a very beautiful, beautiful Ruth, and thank you so much for bringing us all together and hosting us so elegantly. Thank you. So a few things that we've heard throughout today, but particularly here, that climate isn't one thing, right? It's stacks of chemistry, it's biology, it's physics, it's human behaviors, it's supply chain, it's compute rather. So all of these things, for me, mean deep tech has a really major part to play in helping solve the crisis. That's not to say that we should just swing the pendulum from the farmer in the field to be fully reliant on technology. But it's particularly crucial right now because we're seeing this geopolitical bifurcation, if you like, at least into two systems in the world. And everybody tells me that they're just hardening. And we should only consider that half of the world is accessible for us as a market now, and our influence. And when we talk about pricing, I think driving fundamental behaviors is so challenging if it can only be applied in one half of the world. And I don't know how to resolve that. So look forward to the discussion tonight. So it's increasingly important for Europe to have this sovereign capability in how we compute in these inventions and the rest of it, for sure. And we're really well placed in many regards. We have fantastic research, great talent. I mean, we're all evidence of that in some regards. But there is a bit of a but in that we singularly fail time and time again to create world-leading, world-scale champions or category leaders. We just stop too early. We don't scale, we don't dominate, we don't win. I'm surprised you didn't mention this, you normally do. It's something I think we need to solve. And we are solving it through a lot of collaboration, through a lot of research. I think capital, I think there's much more capital available in venture now in Europe. I disagree with a lot of the allocation mechanisms being used. I think picking winners, I think way too much government's involved in that, and it needs to stop. But the thing that's missing more than anything is the know-how, the expertise to really scale businesses. There's evidence of people here. We have around 600 people helping our startups, but it's that kind of know-how being applied to help the founders of tomorrow really be successful, to grow their level of aspiration, their scale of ambition, way beyond where we are today. Because right now in Europe, we're leaking value, but we're leaking impact as well. And they're the things that I think we need to solve. We were set up to do our little bit to do that by the University of Cambridge, by ARM, and some other investors in the UK. And we've worked just for 4 years, we're still young and little. Across Europe, actually, we now have 64 companies in the portfolio. So I want to just touch a little bit on how those companies are contributing, but I don't want to repeat everything that's been said. So I'd like the conversation then, if we may, to lean into how do we do more of these things? How do we create more impact at scale? And how do we make a difference? So there are 3 categories of companies that I want to touch on. One is those that are directly helping the farmer. And that might be, in the first instance, new seeds. So using the organelle, creating new traits to allow seeds to be resistant to disease or to heat. Things are changing, things are happening. We need to change the organelles to replicate that as well. We need to have much more information and data to know what's actually going on so that we can deal with it. I was speaking to one of our portfolio founders last night. They have a great business. They fly over apple orchards and vineyards, look at the flowers being developed, the canopies, and they can change the treatments, right? Water, fertilizer, weed killer, whatever it might be. And he was citing an example of one of their customers who they They bottle over 1 billion bottles of wine a year. It's probably not that great, but this isn't going publicly, is it? Over 1 billion bottles of wine a year. And last year they produced 25% more yield than they expected to. And that sounds great, right? Except it's not, because they didn't have the vat capacity. They hadn't pre-sold those things already. They were done. They only needed 75% of what they produced. So without having the knowledge of what was going to come off the vine, they dumped very expensive fertilizer called grapes throughout everything. The load on their plant was excessive in that year because it was carrying so much fruit. It was damaged for future years. It was less resistant. They used way more water, fertilizer, weed killer than they would otherwise have needed to do. So this stuff really, really matters. And it's just one example of just seeing something earlier makes a huge difference. Now, that seeing something cannot be a single farmer walking around the field. He or she cannot cover everything. They can take samples from odd places. So what it enables is the mapping of the overall orchard, and some of these things are massive, inside plastic awnings or other. It allows those things to be automated, per plant treatments and things like that. But one thing I do want to say on that, though, that this is not a pure technology play. It is utterly impossible, I think, to codify all of the know-how, knowledge, and expertise that a farmer or any practitioner has, for that matter. It's just impossible. Anybody who's got a farming background or knows people, this field's a bit different from that field. The frost touches here, it doesn't touch there. The water tends to settle here, unless this has happened in the autumn, and these things always change. And right now, it's, we'd have to be interviewing farmers for 10 years to download all of their knowledge, to be able to codify that and turn it into treatments and things. So that's one or two examples, but elsewhere in the supply chain, things matter as well. Baracal is a business that's been created by Xavier, 15 years of research from the University of Cambridge into materials. It's a solid material that can have a 50% improvement in the heating or cooling effect. Unbelievable capability, unbelievable technical breakthrough. And by the way, it doesn't emit the damaging gases and can be retrofitted into, whether it's heating or air conditioning units or whatever it might be. But how do you create a big business out of that? Whenever you've got something new, you're challenging the status quo. These things are really difficult. There are lots of vested interest. I think, Osman, you talked to this, right? In maintaining the status quo of not, how many companies are reliant now on the current heating and cooling systems? Just a ridiculous inertia that you're facing. So that's really challenging. Another great example of that, as we move more into the data center now, and all this AI compute that's going to save the world, sadly is costing the world at the same time. So there are lots of companies driving down energy usage. There might be some breakthrough techniques as well if we all collate our efforts and work a little bit harder to invent new ways of doing things. Another portfolio company we have is addressing the issue of what's called cold data storage. So there's a lot of data around the world that isn't accessed very frequently. It's about a $9 billion business and growing. And all of that data is held on tape. And you've probably seen these huge automated libraries for accessing, retrieving, and sometimes writing these things. These guys are creating holographic storage. And the amazing thing about that is that it doesn't need to be maintained in the same cold, or whatever it is, the constant cool environment. It's just an astonishing technological breakthrough. So my call to action, if you like, we have a variety of different people in the room, is to help these folks scale their businesses to be world-class, world-scale category leaders. If you're running a corporate, work with these people in a way that allows them to prove out their technology, not just in the lab or in one place, but to really scale it. Work with them, be patient over time. Don't expect them to solve all your problems today. If you're a policymaker, particularly around tax, make sure that the investment incentives are there, incoming and outgoing as well, so that we can do the right things in the right way and make the difference in the right way as well. So I'll leave it there. I think we've probably overrun a little bit, judging by the body language. So I'll leave it there. But honestly, I'm humbled to be in this company. I look forward to meeting and talking with more of you later on today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. So we have the technology to save water. We have the technology to regenerate soils and to reduce waste and to harness data. So we have all talk about this. So the bottleneck is not only invention and innovation, actually implementation. How to do that is also that one big topic we are not talking is incentives, because to align incentives to make sure that the government policy, the finance, the market mechanism, and also entrepreneurship to drive implementation is crucial important. Of course, we have different policy, we have banks, we have insurance company. These are all elements into the big machine, right? So I look forward to our next panel, which will be in 20 minutes and will be about regenerative agriculture. I can tell you, everyone walk away from today's forum will be full of hope, because we have innovative technologies, we have everything that is needed, and we have practitioners. They have enormous aspiring practices all over the globe, and especially in the Nordic. So we are leading sustainability practices in the world. And then, as Stefan opened the forum, lagom economy, it is possible. It is only we have to invent the system to align the interest. Okay, so let us have a break, and thank you so much for our esteemed panelists and speakers. Our first keynote in this session is Christina Elgaard, a passionate advocate for regenerative agriculture and resilient food system. With a background in sustainability leadership in her family office, Catrup Group, Christina brings a unique perspective on how culture, nature, and farming must be reimagined to restore balance. She will share how regenerative practice not only heal the earth, but also provide pathways for prosperity and resilience. So please join me in welcoming Christina Yilding Han Elgaard.
Thank you.
And Christina comes from Denmark.
Yeah, I come from Denmark. So, ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today not only as a board member, investor, and business angel, but also as a farmer. My family owns farmland, and we invest in agtech startups. And I know from my own personal experience, the fields we tend are deeply tied to the future we shape. Agriculture is not abstract. It's lived every day by families, communities, and nations. And this year's forum is about the climate impact on agriculture and its profound ripple effect on the global economy. Couldn't be close to my heart. Yeah, the theme of this forum couldn't be close to my heart, because every decision we make on the farm ripples beyond our farm gates. Whether to adapt to new technologies, and whether to change practices, and whether to pass ownership to a new generation, it ripples far beyond our farm gate. It shapes prices, it influences national security, and it determines whether capital delivers a climate impact or not. It defines whether we succeed or fail in our global transition. So let me share 4 perspectives with you. The first one is about technology and innovation. On my own land, I see how tools like precision farming and carbon certificates already exist. The bottleneck is not invention, it's adoption. But agriculture is cautious. Farmers work on long cycles with narrow margins, and for them, change is a risk. Technology that could transform our footprint often take a decade or more to spread. Yet climate change is not waiting. We must create frameworks that help farmers adapt faster. That's both political, cultural, and financials. Because venture capital is already here. The solutions are here, but unless they reach the soil, they change nothing. As an investor, I see a paradox. The money is flowing, billions go into agtech and precision tools, but the impact lacks. And why is that? It's because capital alone is not enough. We cannot expect farmers to carry the risk without incentives. Through our investment, I've seen that it works, whether it's Agreena's carbon footprint platform or it's Agreena or Cordless. I can see it's working when you have these incentives. When farmers are paid carbon storage, they change their practices. And when financing is linked to sustainability, adoption accelerates. So the question is not whether we have the money, but whether we design it to both returns and resilience. The next one is about food security. And agriculture is not only about food and climate, it is also about resilience and security. The war in Ukraine proves how disruption in one bread basket can ripple across continents, raising prices and fueling unrest far beyond Europe. On our farm, we are daily reminded that food is way more. It's critical infrastructure, just as important as energy and defense. In Finland, where I recently joined the delegation, agriculture is openly recognized as national security. Self-sufficiency equals independence. We need to see agriculture not only as a part of the green transition, but as a part of resilience agenda as well. Let's have a look into generational shifts. In Europe, only 6% of farmers are under the age of 35. This means that decisions are often made by those who did not grow up with digital technologies or sustainability as a second nature. My farm, like many others, is multi-general. We see there's a tension, but there's also a lot of opportunities it creates. The next generation is digital natives. They understand data, systems, and climate change, but they lack ownership and they lack capital. So if we want agriculture to adapt, we must not only finance technologies, but also transition in leadership. If we empower young farmers, it could be the most powerful climate policy of all. So what about the next steps? It could be these steps. We embed food security in climate strategy. We enable generational leadership, align capital with incentives, and accelerate adoption. Agriculture is often called conservative, but if we get this right, it can become one of the most transformative forces of our age. My family's work on our farm keep me grounded in this truth. Farming delivers more than food. It delivers resilience. And if we design it wisely, it deliver climate impact for the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. So next we have a voice from one of the most tradition-rich industry on earth, champagne. Christopher Ruscon, owner of the house director of Champagne Hattensöhne, will show us how climate change is already reshaping not only yields and the soil, but also culture, heritage, and identity itself. He brings first-hand experience from changing grape yield to evolving soil practices. His insights would remind us that agriculture is not only just about the food security, which Christina just mentioned, but it's also about preserving the way of life. The climate change is not only a scientific or economic change. It's not only that challenge, but it's also a culture challenge. Please give us a warm hand, Christopher Ruscon.
Okay. So thank you very much for welcoming me here. My name is Christopher Ruscon. This is also how a farmer can look. I know that someone here said this is how a farmer can look. Well, I work in the champagne industry. And I've been doing that my whole life. I started at 21-year-old. My family's been in wine since 1825. And I was lucky enough to start working with wine at a very early age. I founded and bought my first house, Hattersöner, in 2006 at the age of 21. So Champagne, to understand, it's 40,000 families working with only farming. Basically, everyone in Champagne works with farming. And what we farm is grapes. Grapes for the most amazing wine in the world, of course, Champagne. Around 3,000 of us, we work with actual production, which means that we can farm our land and produce champagne. And then there is around 300 champagne houses, and this is the possibility to buy from the 40,000. And there's only 300 champagne houses left, and the last license was awarded in '94. So it's a very unusual one, and I'm very lucky to own 2 different licenses. So Hattersöner, which I founded from a house from '55, and Agraparivis, which is from 1894, which is one of the most prestigious houses in the world. But Champagne is shaped in culture. Everyone knows how it tastes. The kings were drinking it, the emperor, and the climate, it shaped the taste. We can follow it very closely. It's not like we talked about the tomatoes earlier. You taste it directly, what the difference makes, and you don't really know if you haven't tasted another tomato from the same field. But here, we can actually see the change happening every day, and we can follow it over time, which is incredible. And that shapes the experience, and in terms, of course, that shapes culture. I'm going to come to why. So Champagne is the most protected brand in France. It's like the king, the royal family here in Sweden is very protected. We have full-time lawyers working for us all time, free from the government, to protect the brand Champagne, because this is cultural heritage. It's also what makes people want to come to our country, France. One of them, of course, the taste of what we do. But this is changing. So when I started working my vineyard in 2006, the Champagne was still looking like it did in the 70s, 50s. Taste-wise, you would have a similar taste profile for the wines. What I really, really saw was in 2012, and this marks a very, very big shift on the taste of Champagne and the smell. And that was the year the climate changed for us in the north, where we could see that the climate impact was directly impacted what we would get in the grape and in the end in the product. And was this bad? No, it was great. Because in the beginning, what we got was more flavor, we got more powerful grapes, we got less problem in the beginning with hail, frost, but this was the early days. Now, moving forward, so of course we got more yield. This was controlled. We talked about wine, someone here, that they dropped the grapes. Well, we do that on purpose because the government is telling us to drop 30% every year to control the pricing. So this is something we do to keep the exclusivity of Champagne. But what happened was the last couple of years, it's more and more unpredictable. We started the budding earlier. We used to do that in April. We do it now in January because the sève, which is from the plant, it comes up very early. It will happen already in December. So it already thinks it's spring in December. Sometimes we have 16, 17 degrees in the vineyard in December. We have 25 to 30 degrees in March, which never happened before. So we have extreme growth, fast growth. And the problem with the fast growth, of course, for us, because we're in north climate, is the heat and cold temperature during the day. And all of a sudden, we start to get more problem with frost. How do we fix that? Water. Water is the solution, but we are not allowed to use water. So what do? We use fire. So all night, the last 2 years, this had never happened before in Champagne. It was a Burgundy method. We need to use fire to keep away the frost. And this is new things happening for us. So it's a real change that I've seen firsthand working with this my whole life. We have the traditional grapes in Champagne. It's divided into 3. You have Chardonnay, which is close to Côte des Blancs. It's Épernay.
You have Pinot Meunier, which goes to Paris, and you have Pinot Noir, Montagne de Reims, which is the strength. These grapes, probably the two downwards, will not exist in 20 years in Champagne. This is the end of the Pinot era because we see this very, very shift in the nature. So we cannot use these grapes anymore. They mature too fast, so we get too much power. They change the taste to be too much intensity. And this, in terms, when you drink it, is not what Champagne was or is, which is freshness, finesse, elegance, it's party. It is not a wine like in Burgundy. It's something else, especially for the big producers. The harvest is coming much, much faster. So when we get the first flowering, which used to happen in June, we do it in May. We used to know it was 95 days to harvest. We don't anymore, we have no idea. And this is something we have to really monitor really closely. We have had to change how we operate the harvest. So mobile teams, that's fine for a small house, but LVMH, they employ 60,000 people every harvest. And it's impossible. We have to take people from Romania, and to employ 60,000 people in one go, we can't handle it, which means nature gives us what we get. So there's the new varieties coming, and this is the reality now everywhere, the replantations of Champagne. Here you have the new ones that we use to try to change. But do they taste the same? 100% no. It's not Chardonnay, it's not Pinot Noir, it's not Pinot Meunier. This is different. And it will change how it tastes. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, we will have to adapt to this new reality. It means that the climate is moving north. And what do we have north? We have the English. And they have the land. They have the land. They have the shock soil which is bearing of water. They have all this with the minerality. And what can they grow? They can grow Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. So it means that what is Champagne today is not the Champagne of the future. And what you associate with Champagne today is not what you are associated with the future. So the festivity, the party, the emperors, the kings, that might be in the future in England. And what we are going towards is more grower, exclusivity, small productions, and change. And we have a huge responsibility. So I don't know if you know, but Champagne is the first global vineyard to be awarded. So it's on the border of biodynamic farming. It's called HVA and VDC certification. We are the #1 driver for climate in the world of winemaking. We take a huge responsibility for this, and I work even more so in the forefront for some of my houses, where we took away the tractors for biodiversity, so only horses. We do our own compost. We work with indigenous yeast, going back to really old methods of farming, even sometime, if you can afford it, farming with the moon, because, you know, someone talked about old tradition, which is true. And they used to say, when the hair grows down, that's when you cut it, because, you said, because that's when they don't grow as fast again, you know? So there is all these old methods that we are using again, and this is inherited from tradition. So we take this responsibility very hard, and that also means all these things that I said, that we really, really try to adapt for us, and that means zero carbon by next year. So we remake all the new winery we are building at the moment, 6,000 square meter, which need to be energy neutral, working only locally. So we source the glass 1.5 kilometers away, only everything around where we live. The oaks, we take them from the mountain where we live. So it's everything connected to what we produce. And well, what would that, the cultural impact in the future? The future for Champagne, I think it's still pretty bright. I still think maybe it's very bright for the English too. It will be something of a different wine that you will see in the future. And will this evolve into something great? I think for the next coming years, you will see more and more wines that look like they do in Burgundy, so more flavor, more different. So we need to change the perception. The big houses will thrive to continue and try to continue to produce similar wines that they've done before. They have to for the cultural aspect. But for smallholders like us, we adapt and we think, okay, we need to do a different wine, something that appeals to a different type of crowd, more like a wine that you eat too and differently. And I think it will have a cultural impact. So it's just to say that nature can actually change what culture we will see in the future. And I am 100% sure that that we will succeed in adapting, but that in the future you won't have the same champagne that we have today. Something like this. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for the fascinating and inspiring keynote. And to complete this session, we'll welcome two thought leaders, and Christopher Bonda will also continue to talk. Katharina Balforga, who is the former Chief Sustainability Officer at Handelsbanken and the fellow of the Exponential Roadmap, and has been leading the way in rethinking financing model and that integrate biodiversity, soil health, and resilience. Kirsten Dunlop, who is CEO of EIT Climate Kick, who has been leading one of the European most influential innovation communities. Kirsten is dedicated to redesign the whole system from finance and policy and industry so that the economy can thrive within safe operating space. She is at the forefront of Europe mission-driven innovation, building coalitions that reimagine the economy within the planetary boundary. So together with these three esteemed panel speakers, they will show us how regenerative agriculture can be financed, scaled, and embedded in our culture and policies, and on how we can bridge the carbon gap and scale regenerative agriculture across Europe and beyond. Welcome, Katharina. Thank you. Big hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, for having me at the forum. I will just share a few quick insights from my perspective. I'm coming at this from a very financial and risk climate finance perspective. My background before joining Handelsbanken and the investment bank was as a private in-house, no, not private, but private practice law firm finance lawyer. So joined the bank then at the investment banking arm, and soon to be joining and heading the team for sustainable finance. So how do we bring sustainable finance solutions to large corporate customers? And then after that, heading the sustainability function at the bank. So it was a mandate that sort of grew from what are the legal risks involved when it comes to finance in general and sustainable finance in particular, then to how do we cater to the large corporate customers, but also the not so large corporate customer, the small and medium-sized enterprises when it comes to transitioning their particular businesses, both from a risk perspective and an opportunities perspective. When it comes to both finance and advisory. And then broadening the perspective, I suppose, again, to looking also at the asset management arm. Typically, banks are not only lenders, they're also big holders of capital on behalf of when we have the benefit of investing the funds of our customers. So coming at it from this particular perspective, and when it comes to agriculture and the resilience and the robustness of the food system and the food value chain, this has unlocked, and we've touched upon many of them today, the risks that are inherent in this quite complex and very intertwined value chain that brings us our food. So the things that I'm looking at particularly now from Exponential Roadmap is, so what are the financing opportunities in making this food chain more robust? Given that we have so many actors along this value chain, we're going to have to look at finance in the broadest possible sense of the word. So there's obviously my background when it comes to lending, and you would look at, for instance, the primary producers, so the farmers. In Sweden, they are often smallhold producers. But there are various other actors here, and hence there are various other abilities to unlock other kinds of finance. So you could either think of, could we cascade other kinds of finance throughout the value chain? What is the purchasing power at the end, and the consumers in buying certain types of produce that are produced in a different way? Because the interesting thing here, and I don't have fully the sort of answer, I'm not at the conclusion of this deep dive yet with when it comes to financing solutions, but it's very clear that at the end of the day, and as Christina alluded to very clearly, this is a matter of resilience as well. Typically when we look at smallhold farmers, the margins in their business are quite slim, and they are at the end of the day the holders of making sure that we can produce food. So we need to, as Stefan also mentioned earlier today, it's very, very difficult, regardless how sustainable you are and how much carbon you sequester on your land. If you cannot manage to make your business a financially viable one, you won't be around, and you won't have the robustness for the supply chain shocks that might hit you. And we've seen a couple of those lately, haven't we? Both when it comes to interest rate hikes and inflation, which is also very closely tied and linked to food and food pricing, and the staple carbohydrates, I suppose, that are commodities. So supply chain shocks are likely to come at us from every which direction in the upcoming years, both for geopolitical reasons, and we are dependent on a lot of things in our food supply chain that are not just the seeds. So there's a lot of other products needed. So a lot of the clues, obviously, and this is not my area of expertise in exactly which farming procedures will make us more resilient, but from the look of it and what we have discussed with a lot of different actors throughout this value chain, there are some of these procedures, regenerative, for instance, that tick more than one box here. So it might be good for biodiversity on the one end, it might help the nutrient density in one end, and it might also help a farm sequester more carbon and help it protect biodiversity, and potentially also, through more circular flows, make the farms more resilient when it comes to other supply chain shocks. Or only one of them, and this is very dependent on the geography, the circumstances, the produce in question, what farm this is and where. So this makes for a very interesting cocktail of various issues to look at. But I think at least, since we are all on a societal level very benefited that we have a robust food chain, this warrants at least a discussion whether some of the financing is blended finance, is it private capital to that particular farmer, which we would ordinarily think in other industries, if you are going to invest in making your business more resilient, that's something you would typically have to raise capital for on your own. In this particular sense, when it comes to the food chain, again, there's a societal and a resilience and a sort of a total defense, civil resilience piece there to be discussed as well, which makes for an interesting discussion on blended finance and also public financing and a mix. The good news is, however, that there's a lot of attention on this particular level and the risks that are inherent in our food chain. And we've heard also some interesting voices from investors investing particularly in ag tech and other solutions. So hopefully there's a lot to be seen in the upcoming decade or so. I think I'll end there. No, I would like to say one more thing, if I may. There are interesting examples also from other countries, because when we look at voluntary markets, such as the biocredits and carbon credits, voluntary markets that are aimed to create incentives for, in these cases, sequestering carbon and also biodiversity restoration. In the UK, for instance, there are a few policy tapestries that help these voluntary markets, such as, I think it's called Environmental Land Management, ELM, but also biodiversity net gain, other kinds of legislation that puts the groundwork there to create incentives for farmers to make some of these investments, to not just sort of provide us with food, but other services that go along with that, and that can be climate adaptation, it can be sequestering carbon, as I mentioned, it can be making food more resilient or more nutritious or whatnot. So there's some interesting examples to find there in terms of public financing as well. Now I'll stop.
So thank you so much. And you actually talk about the kind of financial solution while you're talking, so I'm just trying to type and try to. You're talking about the financial solution that which can really unlock incentives in agriculture. And then you talk about a blended financing model. So I was just thinking about, like green fund, climate fund, they could co-financing the irrigation infrastructure, for example, or lowering the entry of barrier for local banks for financing smaller farmers, the household. And also, for example, like you can also have the outcome-based, like performance-based kind of financing. For example, like soil carbon contracts where payments are linked to verified sequestration results. And they're also, which you practice a lot of that, and also cover cropping and so on. So then you can also have green transition bond, which is like sustainability linked with loan with interest rates drop if, like say, deforestation free or certain kind of criteria being met. And also they are, we talked about earlier, because in the session, you're in the first session, we talk about insurance. We can also have insurance innovation, which is, for example, like Zurich insurance, which they can, like they could have the products which protecting the small households in the, let's say in Africa, for example, from drought. If their practice could do certain thing to prevent themselves from being bankrupt during the drought season, then the insurance company could incentivize them, giving them better insurance product and so on. So there are carbon diversity, carbon biodiversity credit markets, which I hope, Christopher, you would enlighten us with that. So there's so many array of products and solutions. It's a matter of one sentence that you mentioned, one word, incentives. Are we incentivized to do that? Because all solutions are there. Yeah, please.
No, but I'm just asking, it's insurance. Who is willing to insure? Who is willing to insure? Because, I mean, this year was the first time in Champagne where we had less grapes because of heat. It's never happened ever in the champagne industry, not 1 year in more than 100 years that is recorded where we have less grapes because of heat. We had 30% less grapes than we can have a normal year because it was too hot. And we have a system where we have 1 year in cellar all the time. We always have 1 year in cellar in case of bad years, which normally means hail, frost, but never heat. Heat is new. Who is willing to insure that? I mean, for us, it's millions of euros. So I haven't found an insurance company who is willing to do it for us, at least. I don't know how it's going to work. But
this is a very deep topic which we actually would like to discuss with insurance company. And this, we could do that over the dinner due to the time constraint. So we will move to the Christopher, and then because today we are packed with absolutely amazing program, and then hopefully we're all gonna enjoy champagne from Christopher, from House Hutton Cerner, and it's absolutely bliss when you drink that. And then so I mean, I would want to drink it before the grapes run out. Yes, exactly. So let us give a listen to Christopher. And then first we give Katarina a warm hand. Thank you. The clicker.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, thanks, Cynthia. It's very nice to be here. Here we have the chart of the biodiversity and how to tackle the biodiversity crisis when the government budget is powerless. And this is interesting because if you look on the gray path here, that's the current state budget. So that's how it looks from the state, how much money we allocate from the state budget. And the Swedish government, which we will look at now, they have a generational goal that we're going to reach. And with that budget and the goal over there, there is a huge financing gap. And how shall we solve this financing gap for future generations? And this is how it looks in figures. If you look to 2025 and we go to 2028, it's in Sweden 1.5 billion euro allocated for expenditure area 20, which is about nature, environment, and climate. So when you look at this one, we get some money from the European Union. So we are about 2 billion euro on annual basis. In the government budget. And you know how much this is of the total budget? It's 1% of the total budget, which is of 1,450 billion SEK. So this shows that we need to take action on the financing gap. So how do we close it? Well, it starts with a willingness to ensure that we will achieve the generational goal, because under that one it's 16 environment targets. And we think we need to approach the corporates, because the corporates are actually the large emitters with huge carbon emissions and environment impact. So we need the corporates to integrate this in their business models. That's what we need, and take responsibility, and the willingness to truly take responsibility, to deliver on next generation, to hand over a society where the major climate and environment problems have been solved. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Because we want to hand over something which is better than we see now. So we suggest we must move outside the tax system, because you won't win any elections on raising taxes. But that said, raise the budget and increase the amount for expenditure area 20. I don't think any politician will go to the election by communicating we're going to raise the taxes massively. That's not going to happen. So we need to step outside the tax system. And you do that through the generational contribution. And from this presentation, I want you to remember two things. It's our kids, next generation, and the target for them. That's one of the most important things that we're going to deliver on. And how do we do that? It's through the hand and the star, and that's the generational contribution. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does this work? Yes. I have to speak very loudly into it. Thank you. I was waiting for somebody to introduce something along the lines of how do we think about intergenerational wealth transfer, responsibility, and the way in which we construct the transfer of risk, and our habit to discount the future in favor of the present. My name's Kirsten. I lead, as Cynthia said, an organization which is Europe's largest climate innovation agency and community. It was created 15 years ago. You could call us a spin-off from the European Commission. We have been an independent structure from the beginning, but we now work in 60 countries. And if you take a Netflix analogy, so think about seasons, we're in season 3. Season 1, we incubated thousands, literally 6,050 something, 72 startups. Half of the Forbes 30 under 30 came from Climate Kick every year. We educated 50,000 plus people all over the world. In fact, I'm looking at an alumnus from some of our programs, and we have alumni all over the world. And we worked with tech transfer from universities, with corporate early stage R&D. We pivoted that whole model 8 years ago because we conducted a fairly stern examination of ourselves in the mirror And one of the things that we noticed and asked was, would any one of the startups and scale-ups that we are supporting really be able to change their industry? And the answer to that was no. Not because they weren't inherently interesting, useful solutions, as we have been discussing, but because none of them had been trained, supported, embedded, geared for transforming entire systems, for thinking very differently about underlying market economics, capital market systems, risk structuring, intergenerational ownership models, really shifting core paradigms. Nor had most of them been supported in such a way that they could have either the bandwidth or the capacity or even just the runway to take on the integration of elements that are necessary to change food systems and agricultural systems as one of the key areas. So we shifted and said, right, well, we're a strange fish. In Italian, you would say we are neither fish nor meat. So we will go to the other end of the problem, and we will launch an opportunity to partner with us to come from the outcome back. So when Cynthia referred to the fact that we run mission-driven innovation, we, for example, lead a European program to decarbonize 112 cities by 2030, and the entire city perimeter, not just one or two technology interventions. And we work to lead a program on climate resilience for 150 European regions, where what is at stake is what is happening with agricultural production, what is happening with watersheds, what is happening in pollination and biodiversity. So I'm speaking from that perspective. And I want to acknowledge that we are sitting here with, I think, the last session before we go to dinner, as the EAT Forum, the EAT Lancet Forum, is launching right now in Stockholm. That's where I was this morning. I came yesterday from Brussels from the launch of the State of the Environment report of the European Environment Agency. We spent the last 6 months working within the Commission in behind-the-scenes diplomacy to try and make sure that they could come forward with a report that stated clearly the economy is underpinned by the environment. Let the environment go and you lose your economy. We've had 6 months of pushback of actually putting that into words. And one of the things that was said yesterday, or the day, actually no, yesterday, was a reflection on the fact that what's in that report, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to give you a couple of statistics. It's worth looking at it. It's 5 years of data from European member states. It's retroactive, but it has some of the beginnings of prospective modeling on the kinds of things that we're seeing in wine production, in crop production everywhere. The summary was, these are remarkably polite words to describe numbers that are terrifying. And they are numbers along these kinds of lines. 81% of protected habitats are in poor or bad condition. 90 to 70% of Europe's landmass is degraded. 62% of water bodies are unhealthy. 30% of Europe is in extreme water stress now. That's before we start projecting. That's the whole of the Mediterranean, and a significant number of areas that you wouldn't expect. The Dutch water system has stopped collecting groundwater, so the Dutch are starting to predict that new houses will not have mains fresh water from 2025. That's pretty shocking for a country where it rains a lot. 34% of the population is at risk of extreme water crisis. That's an actual. If you add that up with a report that was recently done, just talking about insurance, by Howden Group for the EIB on Europe's agricultural risk and agricultural food production, the current costs annual average loss is 28.3 billion. 6% of Europe's crop production is being lost now, annually. The projected, as soon as you go forward and you start looking at any one of you combine the way insurance thinks about risk and you combine climate scenarios, and these are pretty conservative, is that we are going towards something in the order of 57.5 billion or 90 billion annual loss in crop and livestock by 2035, 2040. Euro. And the protection gap, speaking very much to your point, is 70 to 80%, i.e. 70 to 80% of food production is not insured. And there is no viable, at the moment, assumption of insuring it. So I wanted to bring in a kind of a closing reflection on, we need to get a lot more serious. We are talking about solutions. We've been talking about solutions for 20, 50 years. Yes, AI has massively stepped up our capacity to do something about them, but these are individual droplets. And what we have not learned or given ourselves the moral authority, the practical capability, and the institutional mindset to shift is how do you take those droplets and form watersheds. And the reflections I just wanted to put together, thinking about where I've just traveled in the last 3 days, are a few things. One is understanding the extent to which some of the numbers we use are smoothed numbers. 3 degrees of warming, so we're currently on track for 2 degrees of warming by 2040 and 3 degrees by the end of the century. 3 degrees of warming as an average is 8 degrees of warming in cities and 5 degrees of warming on landmass. That's why we're already seeing such massive heat shifts. What it does to crops and food and agriculture, usually you would assume higher carbon dioxide produces higher photosynthesis, so you actually get a lot more excess crop production. What it seems to apparently do is increase sugars. So the big 3 staple crops of human civilization, wheat, corn, and rice, are turning into junk food. That's diabetes, that's cardiovascular diseases. There is a massive set of correlation of effects. When I am running huge change programs in cities and regions, and I'm sitting at the table with city governments, regional governments, and national governments, and I'm saying, where is your health ministry? Because every single thing you change here is going to affect every aspect of the way in which you're running money on health. Where is the Ministry of Core Finance and Economics on pensions? One of the core things I think we need to reflect on is the stability factor. Long before we run out of places to live that are still cool enough, we will run out of the political, economic, and social stability to act. And this is where I think we need to start thinking about anyone who is holding significant amount of capital, investment structures, the opportunity to intervene in policy. What are we doing on a few of the very large-scale aggregate effects to change not just the individual intervention point, the individual acupuncture point, but the way in which that acupuncture point adds up to new feedback loops? So if I name 4 of them, we continue to talk about investment with a single asset class mindset. When I go to say, okay, I have 112 cities, here is the aggregate number on what they need in green cement, green glass, green plastics, green logistics, decarbonized food systems, I get a response of, okay, that's fine, but I can only talk to you about this one. I'm used to investing in housing. Can you give me the number on this particular class of housing? And I say, well, the thing about housing is that the digital infrastructure needed for in-home healthcare and the digital infrastructure for energy efficiency in housing is the same digital infrastructure, and we've got an aging population, so we're going to need to put that all together. And we definitely need to get food waste down and agricultural waste down, so we need to incorporate the way in which we think about food delivery supply chains and last mile logistics. Can you invest in that? No. That's way too complex. Go away, come back and find me a bankable asset. We need to really think about systemic investing, where we invest in a combination of things. It's the relationships between things we've heard right throughout the day. The seed, the watershed, the underlying soil condition, the way in which we're able to get precision fermentation, or the way in which we're able to combine cooling and getting things to market so that we reduce waste. All of that combination of things is what we actually need to invest in. But that requires frameworks. There are frameworks out there. There's a recent report from the work that's being done by the Systemic Investing Initiative on financial orchestration. So there are opportunities, but it's a paradigm shift. It's not a technical shift. It's a really significant paradigm shift. Then there's the question of the economic paradigm. One of the things that is giving me enormous hope is what I was doing not last week, where I was in New York, definitely didn't pick up much on hope, but the week before in Singapore, where a massive impact coalition launched to bridge the rise of the global south and Southeast Asia into Europe, because there is a huge interest and appetite to partner with Europe. The core of that coalition has named its objective in the following terms. We are committed to set into the core of the global economic system well-being, love, regeneration, and life affirmation. We will bring into the core global system mutations that are about deeply regenerative principles in which we take on a Taoist understanding of holism. Now, I was sitting there watching JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, start to use that language and thinking, I wonder what this would look like if I airlifted Mario Draghi in here and had a conversation about competitiveness and security and resilience. There is a very interesting question here on how we shift the underlying paradigm. Because again, a lot of what we're discussing is investment and return and competitiveness in the construct of an existing system that is broken. Because that existing system is still assuming extraction. And in agriculture, realistically, as a species, we're going to continue to extract. And that's going to be biomass, if we can get ourselves off fossil fuels. But then we're going to have to really think about, indeed, lagum, sufficiency. We can't assume that the underlying design principle, incentive principle, and success principle is efficiency. It has been disastrous. We are going to have to shift it to resilience first, because that's the stability function, followed immediately by sufficiency, because that's the question of, do we want to design a planet for 10 billion people or for 1.5 billion people? And if you go back to to New York last week, you've actually got an organized civilization war on AI, which is exactly about reducing to 1.5 billion of an elite able to live with human enhancement, robotics, and AI. And that is very much at the core of the US administration's objectives. So we have a big choice that was named several times. Which kind of future are we actually financing? Because if we're financing the introduction of acupuncture points on an existing system that is extractive, based on efficiency, and looking for above market returns, we're financing a world in which 1.5 billion live, but not 10. The third element is around governance paradigms. One of the biggest challenges we have is that we are also continuing to assume centralization. We're continuing to assume the organization of things in the way in which we've done them. Most of what we're seeing, whether it's investment, institutional arrangements, distributions of effects in more effective and resilient agricultural and food practices, are rhizomatic. They are extremely distributed, extremely decentralized. They are modular, nodal. They don't have a centralization of effect. They're much more based on symbiosis. And in fact, the core of regenerative agriculture in the work that we do, for example, we work with the Government of Ireland to take the entire country to sustainable bioeconomy. What we're doing there is working with farmers, particularly on principles of regeneration. But regeneration in dairy and beef means introducing principles of symbiosis that get you closer back to the abundance logic of ecosystem services. But that leads me to a very, very significant element of change, paradigmatic change, which is governance and culture. 80% of Irish farmers are part-time farmers. So they have a massive identity investment in being a farmer, but they do not have either the time, the bandwidth, or the age to think about the advanced AI and the advanced tools and technologies and techniques. And so that phrase that was stated before, the bottleneck, and thank you very much, Christina, is not invention, it's adoption, is really sitting there. The culture of change in Ireland is the single greatest obstacle. The next immediate one is the intermediaries who are holding all of the interests. And the shift needs to come in paradigms of ways of understanding self, but it also needs to come in terms of grief, of letting go, of rituals of catharsis, of actually letting go the ways in which we've lived. And then I'm going to come, and I'll finish now, come back to this question of the risk paradigm. Insurance. One of the interesting experiments that I think, as we think about how do we shift the way in which we unlock finance and address these massive funding gaps. The cities I work with is a 650 billion funding gap. We may be able to do it with investment. I think Earth for All, some of the big proposals that are about changing the tax system, thinking about generational wealth transfer, thinking about generational dividends, yes, maybe. But we have another way of doing this. Take the net present value of everything that we currently have, which is not priced for its real risk, and turn that and understand that from a value at risk perspective. 1 or 2% of that right now invested very deliberately in an accelerated joining up of all of the solutions that we've heard, so the relationship piece, and a distributed and decentralized ownership of them would actually get us so much further forward. So if you think that after the credit crisis, the Financial Stability Board was appointed, and it introduced something called too big to fail. It named a series of banks and insurers all over the world that said, if you fail, the economy will go down with you, so you are obliged to take a much more systemic view of risk, and your directors are personally liable for doing that. If the Financial Stability Board were to introduce a next draft of legislation that said these 4 or 5 provisioning systems, food, water, soil, housing, are so systemically important that they must transform, you will force into the entire financial system incentives to say, well, I'm not going to insure, I will not lend, I will not provide mortgages unless you are actively investing in transformation. And then insurance starts to come to the table. But that requires investors to start to sit down with risk holders to say, our net present value is directly at risk, and we need the financial system to start to put that through. I think there's something about our own culture, and I'm going to focus on a culture of finance investment because I think that's fundamentally what we're here for. But that really needs to take us somewhere towards this notion of a mutation of our own system, so that we don't tell ourselves what we should do, but we start to just try alternatives, try on for size, the kinds of alternatives at scale we need. And I very much welcome the kind of intimate conversation to say, could we walk out of here with 3 agreements each that would take 3 large steps in those kinds of directions? That would be a wonderful outcome.
What a beautiful suggestion. What a beautiful suggestion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I love how you lay out all the figures, Kirsten. So one kind of bleak fact is agriculture feed, 8 billion people on the planet, and emit at least 1/3 of all the global greenhouse emissions. However, it receives only 4%, less than 4% of the climate financing. Now talk about the national economy. Climate financing, even just add a little bit salt on the wound, what you just said, and it's just less than 4% of the climate financing. So therefore, I think that if all of us could walk out of this forum with 3 partnerships formed, or deals made, or collaboration established, that would be marvelous. So I would like us to continue the discussion, and then thank you all our esteemed speakers for such a wonderful insight and a wonderful forum. Thank you so much.